Chapter 182. Looking at the smiling monk, Feng Qi, who was sitting on the torture chair, couldn't help but laugh. He never thought that the monk would be a member of the hidden human forces. The monk always gave him the feeling that he wasn't reliable. Usually, he never studied seriously and always complained that he was tired. Whenever he encountered trouble, he would admit defeat. He was the perfect model of a problematic student. If it weren't for his background being the Prajna Domain Battle Group, with his learning attitude, he would have been expelled from Star City University a long time ago. More importantly, there was one more thing. He clearly remembered that during the physical examination, the monk's strength was not up to par. But from the looks of it now, the monk must have used some method to disguise his strength. Looking at it from a historical perspective, the monk's evaluation in history was extremely high. When he looked at the monk's personal information, the netizens discussed and speculated that the monk's change had a lot to do with his death. But from the looks of it now, it obviously wasn't. In fact, the monk was a member of the hidden human forces, and he was also secretly plotting against the domain forces. The future people's evaluation of the monk was spiritual teacher, and he preached spiritual inheritance all his life. From the looks of it now, this might also be a plot against the domain forces. Looking at more and more hidden human forces that chose to stand up, Feng Qi felt extremely happy. A few days ago, the Black Shadow told him in the water prison that his actions didn't have any impact on the outside world. So he thought his plot had completely failed. But from the looks of it now, his plot succeeded. The appearance of the Prajna Domain Battle Group, led by the monk and other hidden human forces, proved that the human race hadn't completely fallen. There were still many hidden forces planning for the future. He wasn't alone on the path of saving the world. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared beside him. You think you won? Just as Feng Qi was about to turn around, the switch of the torture chair was pressed. Instantly, intense pain swept through his body. His muscles trembled, and dense blood vessels appeared in his eyes. Compared to the physical pain, the mental pain was much more intense. His consciousness gradually blurred. He heard the monk's voice in his ears, followed by a lot of noise. At this moment, Feng Qi could clearly hear his heavy breathing. His consciousness seemed to be slowly separating from his body. No way. I'm going to die at the crucial moment. I still want to see how they defeated the Research Institute. There seemed to be a fierce battle going on outside. Mother of ***. Black Shadow, F***CKU. His vision was completely shrouded in darkness. Sitting on the torture chair, his body drooped down weakly. After Feng Qi's death, a battle broke out on the execution platform. The domain force, who had been hiding behind the scenes, could no longer sit still. The live broadcast was cut off immediately. Black shadows descended on the execution platform and began to attack Tyrant and the others. Feng Qi's death was like a clarion call against the Research Institute. Thus, the curtains of a magnificent historical trend had been drawn. Opening his eyes, Feng Qi found himself leaning against a metal table. There was a familiar metal container on the table. Inside the container was a slowly beating brain. The aftereffects of reading memories caused him to be in a daze for a while before he came back to his senses. At this time, the two memories overlapped in his mind. The experience before reading the container's memory became very blurry, and he could not remember what had happened before that. At this moment, a voice sounded in his mind. Aji, long time no see. Did you miss me? Narrator, long time no see. Hearing the familiar voice, a smile appeared on Feng Qi's face. You're still suffering from the aftereffects of overlapping memories. Rest for a while. You can ask me if you have any questions. Hearing this, he immediately nodded and then asked, Narrator, has this timeline been changed? Congratulations, you have successfully changed this timeline. The future world you are in is on the verge of collapse, but it has not completely collapsed. There is now a human city on Star City Sanctuary. When you entered the future dream, you did not directly contact the human city because you were afraid of accidents. Instead, you came to Scarlet Shelter to read the memory first for safety reasons. After hearing the narrator's answer, he was silent for a while before he continued to ask. So, do we defeat the Research Institute? Yes, but before the Scarlet Institute defeated the Research Institute, it hid in a secret underground base in the chaotic situation. Hearing the narrator's answer, he was not surprised. The Scarlet Institute hiding in the secret base in advance was something he had discussed with the Scarlet Institute's higher-ups. In any case, the Scarlet Institute would not participate in the fight against the Research Institute, because the Scarlet Institute was an important channel for him to obtain information. If something happened to the Scarlet Institute, he would lose a lot of important information, including the brain in a vat reading memories, psionic technology, memory implantation, and so on. Therefore, the Scarlet Institute must prioritize stability. Preserving important information was the Scarlet Institute's core goal. Since we have defeated the Research Institute in this future timeline, has Xiao He disappeared? Feng Qi asked the question he was most concerned about. If Xiao He disappeared, it would be the same as removing the curse in the future dream world. They would have more time to prepare for any future operations. I'm sorry to tell you that he did not. Just now, you checked the information left behind by the Scarlet Institute. Vivian's message said that after the Research Institute's domain force was destroyed, Xiao He still appeared. F***, why is that? Hearing this, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. Perhaps it has something to do with the Research Institute's core MO. Although the Research Institute's domain force was removed, it was not completely destroyed. They took the mysterious MO with them before leaving the Research Institute. We have reason to suspect that Xiao He was born in Mo's hands in the end. Then, is Xiao He on the way here? I'm not sure. Xiao He still hasn't stepped into my sensing range. Perhaps the Xiao He in this timeline has already given up on killing you. But don't get your hopes up. Maybe it's because it's too far away and it's on the way here. It's haunting me. Sad, this timeline didn't see Xiao can perform splits for us. I miss his first day. Ignoring the narrator's complaints, he reached out and pressed the black switch on the metal container. Suddenly, a black liquid flowed out of the container. After coming into contact with the black liquid, the brain that was originally beating gradually lost its vitality. Let's rest. He closed the lid of the metal container. He placed the container containing the brain into the center groove of the metal table and closed the lid. When he looked down, he saw the suction cup lying on his chest. History had changed, but the suction cup was still there. Next, he decided to go to the Star City Sanctuary to interact with the people from the future and learn more about history. He took the elevator to the first floor of the Scarlet Secret Base and walked straight to the exit. The changes in history didn't change much in this secret base that was built in advance. After looking around, he gave up the idea of exploring this place. He followed the metal tunnel to the outside world and walked out of the abandoned hospital. He looked up and saw the sun hanging high in the sky. But the sun's rays were very dim and there was no warmth. The nearby buildings were still in ruins and weeds were everywhere. It was obvious that no one had been here for a long time. He wasn't surprised by this. Today, 1,500 years later, even if the world hadn't been swallowed by the domain, the residents had obviously entered the Star City Sanctuary in advance. After all, there were so many domain transcendental creatures outside. Staying in the city was completely suicidal. Looking up to the west, a blood moon hung high in the sky, squeezing the space of the sun. The human world and the domain world were two worlds that were clearly separated. At the intersection of the two worlds was a twisted black line that was slowly eating away at the space of the human world. Seeing this familiar scene, Feng Qi's heart sank. He knew that this world would eventually face the apocalypse. Thinking of this, he immediately switched to his battle form and walked toward the Star City Sanctuary. The overlapping state of memories gradually merged with the passage of time. During this period, a lot of important information that he obtained when he checked the database of the Scarlet Secret Base appeared in his mind, and a piece of game code even popped up in his mind from time to time. These memories clearly prove that Vivian had finally succeeded in developing the technology related to knowledge implantation. This time, the Scarlet Institute left him a lot of important information. After his death, his body was taken away by the Scarlet Institute's subordinate battle group that had been set up in advance. After leaving the execution square, they immediately took out his brain, placed it in a special container, and injected it with an active nutrient solution. Thus, his brain was preserved. However, the process of this battle group leaving the future city was very complicated. After his death, the domain force behind the Science and Technology Research Institute gave up on hiding and chose to take the initiative to take control of the entire future city as soon as possible. During this period, an extremely tragic war broke out. The domain force behind the Science and Technology Research Institute had thousands of domain creatures. However, the weakest among them had the strength of a silver rank, and the strongest had the strength of a gold rank. At that time, the various forces that participated in the war all paid a heavy price and engaged in a fierce, protracted battle with this domain force in the future city. During this period, the subordinate domain battle group of the Scarlet Institute was also attacked by the domain force behind the Science and Technology Research Institute. In the end, at the price of losing 1/3 of their members, they successfully evacuated the future city and returned to the Scarlet Institute with a container containing his brain. The situation in the future city fell into turmoil. In this battle, the monk finally died, and the Prajna domain battle group lost nearly half of their combat strength. The Future Research Institute was almost completely wiped out, and Li Xingqian's successor, Jia Hui, also sacrificed himself heroically in the war against the domain force. Other than that, there were also the Victory Research Institute, the White Skeleton Domain Battle Group, the Awakened Domain Battle Group. More than 10 forces participated in the battlefield to encircle and annihilate the domain force behind the Science and Technology Research Institute. This battle lasted for half a year. After that, more human spies arrived one after another. In the end, they completely defeated the domain force behind the Science and Technology Research Institute. Fortunately, they won in the end. In the future, the Science and Technology Research Institute belonged to humans again. All the traitors who had sided with the domain forces were also dealt with and sent to the gallows. And his experience was also announced to the world after the victory of the battle. From then on, he went from a traitor to a great man. At this moment, there is a list of human spies in his mind. The forces on the list were all forces that had stood up to declare war on the Science and Technology Research Institute in this battle. This list was the most important gain of his future line. Realizing that there were so many forces secretly standing on the side of humans, a smile appeared on his face. Aji, don't be happy too early. Look carefully at the names of the forces on the list. Don't you find any problems? Have you forgotten the reminder given to you by the Scarlet Institute? What reminder? Feng Qi was stunned. The effect of the overlapping memories was still there, so he had not completely remembered a lot of information from the Scarlet Institute's database. The Scarlet Institute reminds you not to completely trust this list. Why? How do you want me to explain this to you? Now look carefully at the list in your memory and find what you think is discordant. Hearing the narrator's reminder, he immediately began to flip through the list in his memory. In his memory, he saw a familiar name on the list. Tiger Soul Institute. To be safe, there was no action against the Tiger Soul Institute in the plan of this future line. Back then, the future line against the Science and Technology Research Institute had changed the world 1,500 years later. However, if the Tiger Soul Institute was added, the future would be filled with more uncertainty. Therefore, when he was planning for the future, in order to see the future, he gave up on the plan to fight against the Tiger Soul Institute. Now, the problem was obvious. The list in his mind was all the human spies who had stood up to fight against the Science and Technology Research Institute. However, on this list, the Tiger Soul Institute's name actually appeared. Good Lord, the Tiger Soul Institute is also standing against the Science and Technology Research Institute. That's the problem. When the domain forces behind the Science and Technology Research Institute were completely exposed, everyone came to step on them, including the Tiger Soul Institute. They sent their subordinate battle groups to participate in the encirclement and suppression operation. More importantly, the Tiger Soul Institute's slogan was "Eliminate the Domain Forces." Don't you think that's infuriating? Feng Qi was speechless. From the information in his memory and the narration's description, he found out where the problem was. When the Science and Technology Research Institute was in a desperate situation, there were also other domain forces among the many forces that came to step on them. The Tiger Soul Institute was the best example. So, the human spies on this list, other than the few forces that arrived at the beginning, the rest are not necessarily trustworthy. That's right. Many of the forces that came later appeared after seeing that the Science and Technology Research Institute was bound to lose. This bunch of bastards is really cunning. Fortunately, it's not like we didn't gain anything. At least the few human spies that stood out during your execution are absolutely trustworthy. Yes, after the next timeline integrates the information, I'll try to make contact with him. He immediately nodded. After several hours of running, he left the abandoned city. At the end of his line of sight was a human city that was tightly surrounded by metal walls. The Star City Sanctuary was also in this city. He had seen this city in the future dream before. At that time, he was still in the form of a living dead and was almost killed by mistake. However, this time, with his human form, he might be able to make contact with the people from the future. Thinking of this, he immediately increased his running speed. Chapter 183. Looking at the metal wall in the distance, Feng Qi stopped in his tracks. With that thought in mind, the patterns imprinted on his body began to distort as a bloody mist emerged and enveloped his entire body. Flesh and blood quickly regenerated. After switching into his human form, he used his bone vein ability to reconstruct his appearance. He then took a detour towards the main gate of the city. The Scarlet Institute had already provided a more reliable plan on how he should interact with the people from the future. Telling the people from the future that he was Feng Qi would be too shocking. More importantly, other than humans, there was a high chance that there were other domain creatures lurking in the shelter. After all, the future line only destroyed the Research Institute. The other domain forces lurking in human civilization were not affected much. He suspected that this was the main reason why the information about techniques in the shelter was blocked. Therefore, directly exposing his identity would greatly increase the risk factor. He might be assassinated after entering the shelter. After taking a detour, Feng Qi arrived at the main gate. Before he even got close to the gate, he saw the statue standing at the gate. This statue still looked familiar to him. The sun shone on the top of the statue, emitting a hazy halo. On the statue, he held a book in his left hand and a sword in his right hand as he looked in the direction of the domain expansion. Time had proven that his previous efforts were not in vain. In exchange for the continuation of human civilization. Even if this time was short, looking at the statue, he felt emotional. He knew that this glory did not belong to him alone. His companions went against the trend and shed their blood for the arrival of this day. At this moment, the figures of his companions suddenly appeared in his mind. Today, I will break the rule for you. Whoever stops you, I will kill them. This is the path that I, Li Xingqian, have chosen. You have no right to deny it, even if you have to be a lowly dog. Brother Qi, do you remember the last time you saw the sun? 1,500 years of time. Their history of stubbornly fighting might just be a speck of dust in the long river of history. But in his heart, it was as heavy as Mount Tai. No one could erase the painstaking efforts they had put in for this day. Then he saw a familiar flag standing at the highest point of the metal wall. The flag had a blood-red background. In the center was a sharp sword and a book embellished with starlight. When he saw the flag, he could not help but be stunned. The images in his memory came flooding back. He recalled the day they graduated from Star City University, the vision they made for their future under the starry sky. Brother Qi, this is the flag I made for Breaking Dawn. The book represents your experience as a teacher in Star City University. The sword represents the process of you establishing Breaking Dawn to fight against domain masters. As for the starlight around the book and sword, it represents us who are following you. I'll vote for this flag. It looks good. I hope this flag will never fall. Don't worry. Even if we all fall, there will still be successors to carry on. I, Xiaolong, am willing to fight for this day for the rest of my life. I also firmly believe that it will rise under the sun one day. Looking at the daybreak flag fluttering in the wind, he suddenly felt that the wind and sand were blinding his eyes. As they wished, the daybreak flag fluttered in the air and bathed in the sunlight. However, none of them could see this scene. They saw it. The daybreak flag represented them to the present day 1,500 years later. It stood on the high wall and looked down at the future they built with their blood. Perhaps this changed future is very short, but it is very real. Hearing this, Feng Qi nodded vigorously. His gaze became extremely determined. Perhaps in the future, you could try to get Vivian to research super technology that can extend human lifespan. Then, in a certain future timeline, you can bring them to victory and witness the ideal future prosperity. Narrator, you really know how to comfort people, Feng Qi said with a grin. Huh. After a short pause, he walked toward the city gate. When he came to the statue, he saw the familiar words carved on it. After glancing at it, he looked at the city wall. At this moment, a figure on the city wall was also looking at him. The figure standing on the city wall was wearing a set of light armor and holding a sharp blade. The figure's sharp eyes were carefully sizing him up through the helmet. As their gazes met, the figure suddenly jumped down from the city wall. After landing on the ground, he came to stand in front of Feng Qi. Just as he was about to ask, he saw the suction cup lying on Feng Qi's chest. Bai Tong, the city guard exclaimed in surprise. He could not hide the surprise in his eyes. Bai Tong was the savior of Star City and the legend of Star City. Seeing Bai Tong, who was unwilling to interact with others, lying on a stranger's chest, he could not hide the surprise in his heart. I'm a refugee from Victory City. Can you let me in? Feng Qi asked. The reason why he said he was from Star City was also an excuse made up by the Scarlet Institute. Because Star City had lost contact with Victory City a long time ago. Therefore, when he said he was from Victory City, Star City could not verify it through any channels. Victory City? Wait a moment. After looking at the suction cup on Feng Qi's chest again, the city guard sheathed his blade and pressed a few times on his right arm. Suddenly, a flickering light similar to a signal popped up on his right arm. After waiting for a few seconds, the light turned into a woman's head. The city guard looked at the woman in the light and began to describe Feng Qi's situation. After listening to the city guard's explanation, the woman in the light was stunned. Then, she looked at Feng Qi, who was standing at the side, and said, "We lost contact with Victory City a long time ago. Do you have any proof on you?" Faced with the question, Feng Qi shook his head. "I don't have any proof." "Then how can we believe you? After all, you could be a disguised domain creature." While saying this, the woman subconsciously looked at the suction cup lying on his chest. She seemed to feel that her words were inappropriate, so she continued. "Although I think you're trustworthy, you still have to show me proof of your identity." "Damn, you're practically an all-purpose suction cup. If it weren't for the suction cup, their attitude towards you wouldn't be so good. I think there must be a way to check if I'm a human in the city, right?" Feng Qi asked. The woman in the light nodded immediately. "Yes, I can also agree to let you in, but there's a condition." Then, she turned to look at the city guard and said, "Hammer, put a restraining bracelet on him. Then, bring him to research room number 3 to find Director Liu for a physical examination." "Okay." The city guard nodded immediately. After ending the communication, he reached behind his waist and took out a pair of metal bracelets. Seeing this, Feng Qi cooperatively extended his hands. After putting on the metal bracelets, he could clearly feel his mental strength gradually slowing down. Psychokinesis couldn't be transmitted out of his body. This kind of technological product was similar to the spirit energy Forbidden Zone invented by Ink in his memory. He guessed that it might be an improved version of the spirit energy Forbidden Zone's technology. Don't act rashly before you prove that you're trustworthy. Follow me closely after you go in. Understood. He nodded immediately. At this moment, the city guard looked at the team members who were watching on the city wall and shouted. Then, he reached out and tapped twice on the virtual screen on his right arm. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the middle of the metal city wall. The city wall shrank to both sides, revealing an inward passage. Following him, Feng Qi stepped into the city. Looking ahead, he saw rows of war equipment lined up inside the city wall. On the left was the UAV area, arranged in descending order. At the front was the Hummingbird UAV for reconnaissance, followed by the multi-purpose medium-sized UAV, and finally the heavy UAV for firepower coverage. On the right was a series of plasma cannons erected in the sky. Their black shells shone with a metallic luster under the sun. Behind the cannons was a closed missile silo. As they continued to walk in, the ground in front of them was inlaid with spirit crystals. There were also formation flags nearby, emitting a soft and hazy light. There were also many other types of weapons and equipment. The inside of the city was more like a super armory. Whether it was weapons of the cultivation system or the technological system, they could be found here. The surface space in the city was completely used for the deployment of war equipment. Feng Qi could understand this. After all, with so many weapons, if they were placed in the underground shelter, they would definitely take up a lot of living space. The most correct way was obviously to transport the weapons to the surface. This way, they could be quickly put to use in the event of an emergency. He followed the soldier for about half an hour. They stopped in front of the black monolith. This was the first time Feng Qi saw the words Star City Sanctuary clearly on the black metal monolith. The man aimed the virtual screen on his wrist at the black monolith. The green light swept across the monolith, and the monolith trembled and slowly moved to the side. Seeing this, Feng Qi could not help but ask curiously, "Is there any other way to open this monolith?" Faced with the question, the man's expression became very cautious. "Why are you asking this?" "Nothing, just asking. It's fine if you don't want to answer." Feng Qi immediately waved his hand. He also realized that his words were indeed suspicious. Looking at the suction cup on his chest, the man was silent for a moment before he suddenly said, "If the outside world is destroyed, Star City Sanctuary will enter a state of internal circulation, but it will still leave a chance for survivors who may exist outside. That is the second way to open the passage to the sanctuary." Although he did not go into detail, Feng Qi already had a rough idea after hearing this. The chance of survival the soldier mentioned was obviously referring to the blood trough detector under the monolith. At this time, the voice of the narrator sounded in his mind. It is also this chance that allows you to understand the truth of the future world. Next, he followed the city defense soldier into the metal passage. Lights lit up along the way, illuminating the path ahead. The moment he walked out of the metal passage, his vision suddenly opened up. What appeared in front of him was a completely different underground plaza. Unlike the empty scene in his memory, the plaza was now crowded with people and even slightly congested. The control panel that was originally covered in dust was now filled with uniformed staff. They wore communication headsets and were in real-time contact with the city defense soldiers outside and the teams that went out to mine resources. The large screen in front of the control panel was divided into dozens of segments and connected to the surveillance cameras outside. The images were quickly switched in real time. Above the sanctuary, high-powered air purification machines were operating at full capacity. Some of the metal gates around the plaza were also open. Everyone was busy with their own duties. Did Victory City also build an underground sanctuary? At this time, the city defense soldier looked at him and asked curiously. Yes, it was built similar to this place. In response to the question, Feng Qi immediately nodded. Next, he followed the city defense soldier to the open metal gate on the right. After entering the gate, they walked down the stairs and arrived at a spacious laboratory. At this time, in the laboratory, many figures in scientific research uniforms were busy on the workbench. The city defense soldier asked Feng Qi to wait in place. He then went forward to talk to a white-haired old man. After a while, he returned to Feng Qi. I have explained your situation to Director Liu. Next, we need you to cooperate with the examination. If you pass the examination, we may give you a resident ID card of Star City Sanctuary. However, you'll have to work accordingly. The sanctuary does not keep idle people. After explaining the situation to him, the city defense soldier said goodbye to Director Liu and then left the room. Next, Feng Qi followed Director Liu for a series of physical examinations. The report was quickly generated. However, as if to be on the safe side, Director Liu continued to conduct a new round of examination and drew 3 tubes of blood. During the blood drawing, Feng Qi was afraid that the suction cup would attack him. Fortunately, the suction cup did not have any intention to kill him. Even when the blood was drawn, the suction cup's eyes were closed and there was no reaction. This made him relieved. Before the examination results came out, Director Liu looked at him and smiled. "You're from Victory City?" When Feng Qi heard this, he immediately nodded and then asked, "How long will it take for the test results to come out?" "To be on the safe side, we have to do a few more tests. It will take another 3 hours. I will take you to see the base commander then." "Then, can I go out for a walk first?" Director Liu looked at the suction cup lying on his chest and nodded in surprise. "You can take a look, but you need to add another layer of insurance." "Go ahead." Then, Director Liu added 2 shackles on his ankles and asked a researcher to follow him. This gave him the freedom to wander around. He walked up the stairs and returned to the shelter plaza again. He looked at the figure in the plaza and had too many questions in his mind. Suddenly, he heard a young voice reciting. He looked to the right in the direction of the voice and found a classroom behind the open iron gate. Hundreds of teenagers were looking at the virtual screen on the blackboard and reading the history text loudly. After the recitation, the teacher on the podium began to introduce the historical figures in the text. Feng Qi stood outside the iron gate and looked at the teacher who was passionately talking about history, as well as the students who were listening attentively with firm eyes. He was deeply moved. Once upon a time, he also listened to Lao Wang's teachings like this. While looking up at historical figures in the history story, he also looked forward to the beautiful future. As for why there was a history lesson today, Feng Qi did not think there was a problem at all, because history was the soul and backbone of a race. A race without a backbone was just a pile of loose sand. History was the foundation of a human race's survival, and it shaped the common recognition of human beings. At this moment, the teacher standing on the podium suddenly smiled and looked at the students. The introduction of these 2 great historical figures is over. Let me ask you a question. Now you all know that the number 1 genius in history is Lin Guiyuan, and the number 1 all-rounder in history is Zhang Daowen. But who knows that there was such a genius whose life was not as dazzling as the previous 2, but he once topped all the geniuses in his era and laid the foundation and direction for the continuation of the human race. His brilliance has always shone in the long river of history and has never been extinguished. He is known as the eternal lighthouse of history. Do you know who he is? Just as Feng Qi was curious about who this person was, a chorus of shouts sounded in the class. "Great ancestor, Feng Qi." Feng Qi was shocked when he heard the name from the children's mouths. "Good heavens, you scared me. The statue of a great man, the flag of daybreak, and now your great ancestor. Agi, you're about to take off." "Wait, F*CK. Why isn't there a narration by great ancestor's father? I'm so angry. History always ignores the most handsome me. I'm unhappy, depressed, and gradually depressed." Chapter 184. Star City Sanctuary. Listening to the teacher's interpretation of him in the classroom, Feng Qi felt emotional. From an unknown person in history to a sinner in history to a great man in history today. The sacrifices in the future finally earned him the respect of the people in the future. But he still didn't agree with the content of the teacher's explanation. At least in his opinion, his personality wasn't as ridiculous as the teacher said. He was also a human, not a saint. What is your Victory City's interpretation of Feng Qi? The researcher with glasses standing next to him looked at him curiously and asked. In the face of the question, Feng Qi smiled calmly. Your history is not the same as ours. In the history I know, Feng Qi was also confused, hesitant, and doubted himself in despair. But in the end, he defeated himself and chose to face despair calmly. Like a mayfly trying to shake a tree, he embarked on the path to change the future. Then you must be reading fake history. In the real history, Feng Qi never hesitated. The ancestors of Breaking Dawn who followed him all said so. The researcher nodded with certainty. Feng Qi. Haha, I agree with him. Agi, You must be reading fake history. I hope you can face history squarely." While feeling helpless, he suddenly felt that the researcher was right. He had once struggled and felt lost, but not in this line of the future. When he walked in this future timeline, his heart was extremely firm and never wavered. Because he experienced confusion and despair in other timelines, his heart had already become stronger after repeated failures. In this future timeline, as the soul of Breaking Dawn, he must show absolute determination to all members. Then, under the guidance of the researcher, he began to tour the rooms in the sanctuary that were open to the public. The entire God sanctuary had formed a very perfect internal circulation system. Breeding, planting, resource allocation, technology research and development, cultivation research and development. Except for children under 15 years old, everyone had their own work in the sanctuary. After walking around half a circle, he stopped in front of a closed iron door. There was a pattern on the iron door that he felt was very familiar. The pattern was dark with a scarlet gem in the middle. This was the logo of the Scarlet Institute. Seeing this icon, he suddenly remembered something. This time, the Lord of the Mist had yet to snap his fingers. Logically speaking, the descendants of the Scarlet Institute should still be around. Why was there no one in the Scarlet Secret Base? The after effects of the overlapping memories were still there. He could not remember what the explanation he saw in the database was. Therefore, he immediately asked in his mind, aside, why didn't the Lord of Mist snap his fingers this time? Why is there no one in the Scarlet Secret Base? They left you a message. You just didn't remember it. As you can see, they moved to Star City Sanctuary 278 years ago. They didn't stay in Scarlet Shelter. Why? Didn't you notice? With every time you transmigrate through the timeline, the tasks of the Scarlet Research Institute are gradually increasing. From the initial research and development of the brain in a vat, as well as the subsequent preservation and consumption, to the current addition of more complex memory implantation technology, as well as the consumption of Lao Wang's research on blood and flesh sacrifice, etc. To put it simply, the resources in the Scarlet Secret Base have been depleted for a long time. The training of new combatants required even more resources. Even if the Scarlet Secret Base could not afford it, they still gritted their teeth and only ate toothpaste-flavored nutrition cream for 365 days. They left behind the technology that should be left to you. In the end, they couldn't take it anymore. They chose to leave the Scarlet Secret Base and come to Star City Sanctuary for help. Because the Scarlet Institute in this future timeline is not a traitor to humanity, they don't have to worry about being targeted. There's also a very important point. Before they left, they used the memory implantation technology left by Vivian to delete all the information about you and the Scarlet Institute in their minds. This is also for the sake of safety. They also believe that there may be other domain forces lurking in Star City Sanctuary. The information in their minds is very dangerous. If the Scarlet Secret Base is discovered by the domain forces, the results of the plan for you will be wasted. After listening to the narrator's explanation, Feng Qi suddenly understood. The truth was as the narrator said. The Scarlet Secret Base's resource acquisition efficiency did not increase, but the consumption of resources in the future timeline increased every time. In the first few times, the Scarlet Secret Base could even save him the resources to cultivate a talent blind box. But now, the talent blind box was completely abandoned. Vivian also explained this in the message. It said that the resources in the base were really tight, and the research and development was a bottomless pit. If they cultivated more domain creatures, they would not be able to operate at all. It seems that when I return to the real world, I have to find a way to help the Scarlet Institute open a resource acquisition channel. Otherwise, the research will not be able to continue in the future. Now that you have the complete virtual reality game code in your mind, you can start creating the virtual reality game when you return to the real world. When the time comes, use the influence of the Scarlet Institute to release the game. A portion of the revenue generated from the game can be distributed to the Scarlet Institute so that they can purchase a large amount of resources in the early stages. He agreed with the narrator's suggestion. In the sacrificial timeline, he had a conversation with the Shadow. The Shadow thought that he was the representative of a domain force. If he didn't offend the Technology Research Institute, he wouldn't stop him from planning for the future, which was the research and development of the virtual reality game. Therefore, from this perspective, it was very safe to release the virtual reality game as soon as possible. After all, the real world was focused on stability, and it would not actively contact the Technology Research Institute. Releasing the virtual reality game as soon as possible could also allow human civilization to leapfrog hundreds of years of development and save a huge amount of resources consumed in research and development and training. As for the game server and other problems, after returning to the real world, he could also ask the Scarlet Institute or the Future Research Institute for help. With the help of this group of people, he didn't need to do everything himself. At this moment, the researcher standing behind him pointed at the iron door and introduced, "That's right. This is the Scarlet Institute's exclusive laboratory. It's not open to the public. Let's continue to explore other places." When Feng Qi heard this, he immediately nodded. Then, he followed the researcher and continued to wander around. Along the way, the researcher glanced at the suction cup lying on his chest from time to time. Then, he enthusiastically introduced the general situation of the shelter. From his introduction, Feng Qi had a general understanding of the layout of the shelter. The current Star City shelter had a total of 218 rooms. For rooms in the east, south, west, and north corners were connected to the third basement floor. The third basement floor was the living area of the shelter's residents. The other rooms in the plaza had their own uses. There were manufacturing rooms for weapons and equipment, storage rooms for food, research rooms for innovation, planting rooms, and so on. 3 hours passed in a blink of an eye, and the researcher beside him received a call. Director Liu said that the test results were out. The report clearly showed that his bloodline was human. Director Liu had sent the report to the base commander. Then, Director Liu asked the researcher to take him to see the base commander. Feng Qi was very curious about the commander of the shelter base, but he also had a trace of vigilance in his heart. Now, whether the Star City shelter was controlled by humans or by the domain forces that infiltrated the base, the current intelligence couldn't be analyzed at all. Then, he followed the researcher to a room in the north of the underground plaza. After explaining the situation to the soldier on duty at the door, the iron door was opened, revealing an inward corridor. The researcher signaled him to continue to walk in, and he would see the commander. Then, he turned around and left. As he walked along the corridor, the lights above his head lit up one by one. On both sides of the corridor, there were portraits hanging on the walls. When he saw one of the portraits, he stopped in his tracks. The main character in the portrait was actually him. The scene in the portrait was the execution ground of the future city. In the portrait, he was wearing a prisoner's uniform. His face was pale, and he was sitting on the execution chair. There was a dazzling sun above his head. The artist depicted his expression in the face of death very carefully. There was indifference in his eyes, but there was also a longing for the future. The sneer on the corner of his mouth was more like he was mocking the domain forces that lurked in human society. There was a date at the bottom left corner of the portrait and a line of words below it. Someone has to stand up and change the world. Why can't that person be me? He came to the room at the end of the corridor and pushed the door open. What appeared in front of him was a room full of technology. The room was decorated in black and white. In front of him was a curved screen that was 3 meters tall and more than 10 meters wide. At this time, 3 men were sitting in front of the curved screen. They were monitoring the situation outside in real time through the images transmitted by the drone. There was also an iron door on the right side of the room. The word "Commander" was written on the door frame. He went straight to the door and knocked on it. The iron door opened and slowly retracted into the wall. He immediately stepped into the room. The decoration in the room was very simple. There was a black office desk that emitted a metallic luster under the light. Behind it was a bookcase. At this time, a dignified man in his 40s or 50s was sitting in front of the desk. At this time, the commander was looking at him curiously. His gaze would occasionally linger on the sleeping suction cup. "Have a seat." Feng Qi didn't hesitate and immediately sat down in front of the desk. "Let me introduce myself first. I'm the current commander of Star City Sanctuary. My name is Xia Qian." Feng Qi immediately nodded. "My name is Feng Qi. I'm from Victory City." "Oh, you have the same name as the Great One?" Xiaolong was slightly surprised. "Yes, that's why my parents gave me this name." Hearing this, Xia Qian's face showed a smile. Feng Qi is also the person I admire the most. He started a new era of human resistance. If it weren't for him, human civilization might have perished today. Speaking of Feng Qi, Xia Qian suddenly became interested. Then, he talked about Feng Qi's past from a historical perspective. Hearing a slightly different version of himself from someone else gave Feng Qi a strange feeling. He could only bite the bullet and continue talking. From time to time, he would praise himself and provoke a round of mockery from the narrator. But from the conversation with Xia Qian, he understood one thing. Xia Qian's ancestor was one of the founders of Breaking Dawn, Xiaolong, one of the 3 brothers of the Xia family. After knowing that Xia Qian was an old friend, Feng Qi felt emotional. He didn't expect that Xiaolong's descendant would become the leader of Star City's humans 1,500 years later. Their relationship also became less formal as they chatted. At this time, Xia Qian suddenly looked at the suction cup lying on his chest and asked, "Can you tell me why White Eye is so close to you?" Facing the question, Feng Qi shook his head. "I don't know. When I met him, he was entangled with me, and I couldn't get rid of him." To prove it, he grabbed the suction cup lying on his chest and turned around to throw it not far away. The sleeping suction cup suddenly opened its eyes and quickly adjusted its position in the air. After landing, it suddenly jumped onto Xia Qian's body and then quickly adjusted its position to his chest and closed its eyes again. Seeing this scene, Xia Qian was shocked. He picked up the test report on the table and glanced at it again. It's the first time White Eye took the initiative to come into contact with someone. But your body test report doesn't show any problems, and we can't find a reason. After a moment of silence, Xia Qian continued. The reason why we let you into the shelter before the test is actually related to White Eye. He's close to you, so you can't be a domain creature. Why? Xia Qian asked curiously as he rubbed the head of the suction cup. White Eye never attacks humans, but he has a completely different attitude towards domain creatures. When Silver Moon's domain suddenly expanded, Star City avoided the crisis with White Eye's protection. Later on, when the shelter was being built, White Eye also helped many times so that the shelter project could be completed normally. You can say that White Eye is the guardian of the people of Star City. After listening to Xia Qian's explanation, Feng Qi suddenly understood. Although he knew from history that the suction cup was once known as Star City's mascot and guardian, he obviously underestimated the importance of White Eye to the people of Star City. This time, he was able to enter Star City without going through the test because of the suction cup. Sir Commander, since it's confirmed that I'm a human, can you give me resident privileges and let me look through Star City's database? I'm very curious about Star City's history and development. Since you've received White Eye's recognition, you can naturally become a member of Star City Sanctuary. After you complete the registration and get your identity code, you can look through it at any time. Xia Qian replied with a smile. At this time, there was a knock on the door. Through the monitor on the desk, Xia Qian glanced at the situation outside the door and pressed the button to open the door. As the iron door opened, a man in a white uniform walked in with a document. He placed the document on the desk, then looked at Xia Qian and said respectfully, "Sir Commander, this is today's inspection report. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." "Thank you." Xia Qian immediately nodded. When the man heard this, he nodded and turned around, but before he left, he took a deep look at Feng Qi. It was this look, and he knew that something was wrong. The sleeping suction cup suddenly opened her eyes. She broke free from Feng Qi's embrace when he was caught off guard. Then, a little bit of starlight appeared in her eyes. A jade-colored stream of light enveloped her body. She had already clenched her fist and suddenly punched the man who was about to leave. Boom! The man was sent flying along with the iron door, and the entire wall collapsed in an instant. The 3 observers who were working outside the command room were also shocked. They took off their headphones and looked in the direction of the command room. They listened to the urgent alarm that rang in their ears. Feng Qi lowered his head and looked at the suction cup who was standing on his thigh in a punching posture. Then, He looked at the shattered wall and the man who was hanging on the wall in the distance. Finally, he looked at Xia Qian, who was already stunned. Feng Qi was speechless. At this time, the voice of the narrator sounded in his mind. Descendant of the Xia family, listen to me explain what happened. Don't be impulsive. Chapter 185. As the alarm went off, dense footsteps could be heard in the corridor. Then, a team of fully armed soldiers came to the control room. They lined up and aimed their weapons at Feng Qi. Seeing this, Feng Qi could not help but hug the suction cup tightly. The leader in black armor stretched out his right hand and pointed at Lin Huang. He quickly made a few hand seals with one hand. Suddenly, the spirit energy particles in the air were attracted and gathered toward him. At that moment, he could clearly feel the pressure coming from all directions, making it difficult for him to move. The ability of the man in black armor was very similar to Lin Huang's psychokinesis. The difference was that his psychokinesis was converted from mental power and was released from his body. The way the man in black armor released his spell was closer to the seal-type spell that Lin Ran had created. Moreover, it was more advanced than Lin Ran's original system. The characteristic of Lin Ran's seal-type spell was that each seal corresponded to a path of spirit energy in the body. The man in black armor directly controlled the spirit energy in the air and quickly drew a fixed spell path. Old Lin has a successor. I'm very pleased. I hope Old Lin can do his best and kill the Lord of Fog. Then, he can be promoted to my right guardian. Lin Huang ignored the narrator's sarcasm and quickly looked down at the suction cup in his arms because of the spirit energy pressure. Just as he thought, the suction cup raised its fist again. Lin Huang was horrified when he saw this. If the punch was thrown, the warrior in black armor would not be able to withstand it. It was too late for him to stop it. However, just as he was about to activate the blood source form and try to forcibly break through the spirit energy ring's restraint to suppress the suction cup's fist suddenly stopped midway. Then, a gust of wind swept forward, blowing the warrior in black armor and the members of the combat readiness team behind him to the ground. After losing the sense of restraint, Feng Qi quickly hugged the suction cup tightly, afraid that it would hurt them. I think I understand now. The suckers must have recognized that they were all humans at the very last moment. Therefore, even if they wanted to kill you, they only repelled you and didn't hurt you. If they were domain creatures, they should be holding hands and singing together on the road to the underworld. Friends go together for life. Feng Qi agreed with the narrator's analysis. Although the suckers had lost their consciousness, they still retained their instincts. Other than Mu Qing's attitude towards humans, Vivian must have also sternly taught the suckers not to harm humans. He had seen this in Murakami's memory fragment. In the memory fragment, Murakami told the sucker that she would work hard for the rise of mankind in the future. P.S. This paragraph is in Chapter 116. Therefore, the fact that the suckers didn't attack humans was clearly one of the instincts they retained after losing consciousness. Looking at the messy control room, Feng Qi felt ashamed and realized that the situation was still very bad. Therefore, he immediately turned to Xia Qian and explained, "Commander Xia, can you listen to my explanation?" At this moment, the fallen members of the combat team stood up one after another, once again aiming their weapons at Feng Qi. The situation became very tense. Just as they were about to make their move, Xia Qian suddenly turned to the combat squad and said in a deep voice, "Don't do anything. This is a misunderstanding." Then, he looked at the black-armored warrior leading the team and said, "Xiao Yi, take some people and guard the door outside the command room. If anyone asks about the situation, tell them that combat readiness and command training is going on inside." Hearing this, the black-armored warrior was surprised. He turned to look at the meat paste hanging on the wall and pondered for a moment before nodding. "I understand." Then, he waved his hand and said, "Follow me to the door and prepare for battle." Then, the black-armored warrior led the team out of the command room. The 3 staff members in charge of observing also looked at Xia Qian at this moment. "You guys go out too." Hearing the order, the 3 staff members immediately removed the communication devices they were wearing and left the command room one after another. At this moment, Only Feng Qi and Xia Qian were left in the command room. Looking at the calm Xia Qian, Feng Qi suddenly realized something. Xia Qian had always known that there was a domain creature hiding in the shelter. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to regain his composure after a short moment of shock. Recalling the black-armored warrior's change in expression just now, he was even more certain of his guess. "Are you surprised that I didn't capture you?" Faced with the question, Feng Qi shook his head. At this moment, Xia Qian obviously still thought that he didn't know about the situation in the shelter. This sudden accident was only because White Eye was activated by the appearance of the domain creature. As for him, he was just a passerby from the beginning to the end. Seeing him shake his head, Xia Qian was indeed surprised. "Did you know that White Eye would make a move? If I'm not wrong, the pile of meat hanging on the wall should be a domain creature, right? How did you know?" Xia Qian was surprised. The Victory City shelter I was in before was in a similar situation. It was also infiltrated by a domain creature, which ultimately led to the tragedy. "Tell me in detail," Xia Qian immediately asked. Faced with the question, Feng Qi didn't choose to directly reveal his identity. Even if Xia Qian was reliable, he couldn't be sure if there was a listening device on Xia Qian or in the room. This was a matter of great importance. He had to first understand the situation in the shelter. The consequences of directly exposing himself might be severe. Maybe there was a super domain creature like the Lord of the Mist in the shelter. At that time, the suction cups might not be able to withstand it. Next, he repeated in detail a set of statements about the shelter in Victory City that the Scarlet Research Institute had already prepared. The specific content was nothing more than the domain creatures infiltrating the Victory City shelter. The final shelter was breached by the domain creatures from the inside out. But what Xia Qian said next was out of his expectations. The situation in the Star City shelter is similar to your Victory shelter, but it's not exactly the same. In fact, the domain creatures in the Star City shelter are more afraid of the base's defense being breached than us humans. Why? Feng Qi was stunned. The expansion of the domain creatures is accelerating. At this stage, there's only one reason why they chose to infiltrate the human shelter. They are too weak and are afraid of being swallowed by other domain creatures outside. But the situation in the base is too good. The domain creatures that are still here are thinking of ways to kill us humans and then take control of the base alone. "Why don't you resist?" Feng Qi asked in a deep voice. Hearing that the human descendants were being bullied by the domain creatures, a ball of anger rose in his heart. Facing the question, Xia Qian smiled bitterly. "You might not believe it, but the control of this shelter was in the hands of the domain creatures for a period of time. They wanted to gradually take control of the entire shelter by suppressing the growth of the human race. After we found out about this, we used the threat of detonating the entire base and risking our lives to regain control of the base. Now we have reached a certain balance with the domain creatures, but I know they have not given up. They still want to regain control of the entire shelter and use it as a living space for them to reproduce in the future." As Xia Qian spoke, he took off his gloves and revealed a red button embedded in a transparent shell on his mechanical arm. "As long as I press this button, the base will enter a self-destruct countdown. This is the only method they are afraid of. Do the other residents here know about the domain creatures infiltrating the shelter? The future is hopeless enough without them knowing." Xia Qian smiled bitterly. "Then do you know who in the shelter are domain creatures in disguise?" "I have a rough idea, but I don't know how many domain creatures are hiding in the shelter. Although the shelter has advanced detection methods, there is no way to investigate. We can't investigate unless we are prepared to fight to the death with them. Sometimes I wonder if the 30,000 survivors in the shelter are the last flames of the human civilization. I don't want the human civilization to be destroyed in my hands." Hearing this, Feng Qi could imagine the pressure in Xia Qian's heart. With the external crisis and the domain creatures trying to take control of the shelter, he was constantly worried that the human civilization would come to an end. At this moment, he also understood one thing. Why was the information about the techniques in the shelter restricted? It was obvious that the domain creatures infiltrating the base had taken control of this part of the authority. Using this method to suppress the growth of the human race was like boiling a frog in warm water. They were only waiting for the day when they could kill the human race and take control of the shelter. The last surviving place of a human race was also seen as a living space by these weak domain creatures. However, Fengqi had no sympathy for these small clans at all. At this moment, he only wanted to kill them all. Thinking of this, he raised his head and looked at Xia Qian. "I'll help you kill them all." Hearing this, Xia Qian looked at the suction cup in his arms. "If Bai Tong is involved, there won't be a problem. But are you sure you can control her?" "Yes." Hearing Fengqi's affirmative answer, Xia Qian's eyes were filled with determination. "Okay, I'll gather everyone in the shelter at the square. You'll be the one to clean them up." Hearing this, Fengqi couldn't help but frown. He didn't object to cleaning up the domain creatures. However, if he really did as Xia Qian said, the domain creatures would definitely hurt the innocent residents when they resisted. As if seeing his worry, Xia Qian immediately said, "Later, I'll get the residents in the shelter to wear defensive talismans. These talismans have the effect of automatically activating to block damage. It's also a necessary equipment for the residents of the shelter to carry during the emergency evacuation drill. Although they're domain creatures, they won't be able to block Bai Tong's attacks even if they activate the defensive talismans. As long as we hurry up and clean up the domain creatures, there won't be any problems. There might still be sacrifices, but the process of removing the poison won't be perfect." Hearing Xia Qian's explanation, Fengqi knew that this was indeed the best choice. There was no perfect choice at this moment. History had proven that every revolution was accompanied by sacrifices. Considering the big picture, Xia Qian's decision wasn't wrong. After a moment of internal struggle, he nodded. "Okay, when will the operation begin? One of them is already dead. The news hasn't spread yet, so let's take advantage of this and not give them a chance to react." Saying this, Xia Qian pressed a button on the table. Instantly, a microphone rose from the center of the table. After pressing the switch, Xia Qian said in a deep voice, "All residents in the shelter, take note. I'm Commander Xia Qian. I'm now announcing an emergency evacuation drill. All residents are to put down their work and gather at the square with their drill equipment." After saying this, Xia Qian turned off the switch and looked at him. "The rest is up to you. I'll cooperate with you." He rubbed the sucker's head. He knew that Xia Qian wasn't counting on him at all. What he cared about was the sucker in his arms. However, he was confident that he could clean up the domain creatures in the shelter. He knew very well how strong the sucker was. Since there wasn't a super domain creature like the Lord of Fog, the weak domain creatures in the shelter wouldn't be able to resist him and the sucker working together. Working together? The sucker is just a weakness of his. Or rather, the narrator and the sucker are just a weakness of theirs. Hearing the narrator's sarcasm, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. Next, with Xia Qian's help, he removed the restraints on his wrists and ankles. At this moment, Xia Qian pressed the switch on the table. Instantly, the bookcase moved to the sides, revealing a set of silver armor neatly placed inside. After taking off his jacket, Xia Long put on the silver armor. When he put on the helmet, the blue light on the chest of the armor lit up one by one. The inside of the armor emitted a buzzing sound from the activation of the energy core. He raised his hand and pulled out the sword from behind his back. The surface of the sword quickly turned red as heat waves rolled out. After testing the equipment and the performance of the weapon, Xia Qian put the sword back on his back. He looked at the surveillance screen on the table and said, "We'll go out after the assembly." "Okay." After waiting for more than 10 minutes, Xia Qian, who had been looking at the surveillance screen, said, "Let's go." He immediately followed Xia Qian out of the command room. After pushing open the metal door, the square was already filled with residents of the shelter who were neatly arranged in rows. This wasn't the first time an emergency evacuation drill was conducted. Every resident was wearing standard light armor and carried a satchel with some daily necessities. For example, compressed energy ointment, compressed water pills, hemostatic bandages, and medical sprays. These equipment were all for use during an emergency evacuation. Although the original intention of a shelter was to be used as the last place for humans to survive, there could also be unexpected situations that would cause the shelter residents to need to evacuate urgently. This drill was to prevent such situations from happening. At this time, a shelter warrior wearing the same silver armor came in front of Xia Qian and said, "Sir Commander, the emergency evacuation is as follows." Before he could finish speaking, the suction cup in Feng Qi's arms suddenly leaped up, and he abruptly threw a punch at the figure. Suddenly, a distorted rune brand appeared on the warrior's body and formed a transparent barrier in front of him. However, in front of the power of the suction cup, this spirit barrier was unable to resist at all and was instantly broken. Boom! Under everyone's gaze, the warrior was punched into a pulp by the suction cup. Even the armor on his body was twisted and shattered. Lock onto the domain creatures around you and kill them. Xia Qian's voice resounded through the loudspeaker in the armor and reverberated above the underground square. After a brief moment of shock, the warriors who were cooperating with the drill suddenly understood what Xia Qian was trying to do. Although they couldn't identify all the domain creatures, at this moment, they swept their gazes around them and began to identify the domain lurking creatures that they had already identified. Realizing that the humans were prepared to fight to the death with them, the lurking domain creatures reacted and decisively launched a counterattack. The killing intent they emitted when they counterattacked was like a lamp in the dark night, clearly visible to the suction cup's senses. At this moment, the suction cup's figure turned into a stream of light and suddenly charged into the crowd. Her four limbs moved crazily on the ground. Wherever her figure passed, the domain-lurking creatures' bodies would instantly explode. At this moment, the suction cup was like the Grim Reaper, her figure quickly shuttling through the crowd. While the suction cup killed the domain creatures, it didn't accidentally injure the humans. It even took the initiative to protect the shelter residents from being attacked at critical moments. Just like when she fought alone against Silver Moon's domain invading Star City. Protecting humans had already become her instinct. When the battle broke out, Feng Qi wanted to help, but he couldn't tell who was a domain creature and who was a human. It seemed to be a battle between humans. He couldn't tell the difference between these domain creatures and the human residents. Thinking of this, he immediately said, "Narrator, hurry up and help me find the target. I'm dying of anxiety. I can't help. Although I have the ability to detect, there are many cultivation systems 1,500 years later. The energy in everyone's body is different. I can't tell who is a domain creature just from the energy in their body and appearance. What if I'm wrong?" After hearing the narrator's explanation, Feng Qi looked at Xia Qian. Next, he chose to use psychokinesis to help Xia Qian fight, binding the target he was attacking and participating in the battle in this way. However, psychokinesis had little effect on these domain creatures. Generally, the bindings would be broken in a few seconds. Fortunately, 1,500 years later, the ordinary residents in the shelter also had a strong sense of battle and began to dodge in the chaos. Coupled with the defense talisman, those domain creatures couldn't do anything to them for a while. The focus and core of the scene was the suction cup that had turned into a jade-colored lightning bolt, shuttling through the crowd. Her killing efficiency was extremely high. In just 5 minutes, hundreds of domain-lurking creatures had died at her hands. When the suction cup exploded at full strength, it was impossible to see her figure clearly. Those domain creatures didn't even have time to defend. When the jade-colored stream of light brushed past them, their bodies would instantly explode. Realizing that the situation was very bad for them, the domain-lurking creatures revealed terrified expressions. However, they didn't choose to sit still and wait for death. Instead, they launched a fierce counterattack. However, the moment the suction cup attacked, their fate was already sealed. Moments later, the square was in a mess, and more than 1,000 figures fell into a pool of blood. The suction cup also stopped at this moment and stood up from the remains of the limbs. As the jade-colored stream of light swept across her body, blood slid down. Then, she turned her gaze to Feng Qi and suddenly ran towards him. Reaching out to take the suction cup, Feng Qi looked at Xia Qian. Xia Qian also happened to turn his head. After a brief exchange of gazes, Xia Qian turned to a warrior standing not far away and said in a deep voice, "Little Yi, arrange to clean up the scene and then count the casualties." With that, Xia Qian walked towards the control panel. Moments later, Xia Qian's voice sounded from the underground square's broadcast. He began to calm the residents in the shelter and explained a reason for the purge. Today, with the apocalypse approaching, almost everyone in the shelter was a soldier. In the face of such a cruel scene, they quickly recovered from their shock. From their eyes, Feng Qi saw the determination in their eyes. They didn't seem to be too surprised by the purge. Perhaps many of them already know about the werewolves in the shelter. Xia Qian's choice to hide, it was not wrong, but he obviously underestimated the inside of the residents of the shelter. Some windows are just paper that no one wants to poke through. No one is a fool. Maybe people in the future are already used to facing cruelty. As for the specific reason, Feng Qi didn't think too much about it. He didn't know when the apocalypse would come. While there was still time, he wanted to check the information and techniques in the database as soon as possible. He wanted to help humans survive the apocalypse. He needed to walk two paths at the same time. The first was to remove the poison from the inside, and the second was to help human civilization rise. Especially the second path, it was the key for humans to fight against the apocalypse. Currently, there are more than 30,000 human survivors in the shelter. If he wanted to increase the number of survivors, he must speed up the development of human civilization. Right now, they could only passively resist the apocalypse. But as long as human civilization could speed up its development, maybe the next time he came, he would see a majestic human shelter city. The number of survivors would also rise from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, or even millions or tens of millions. As long as human civilization was strong enough, maybe he could resist the apocalypse with people in the future in a certain timeline. He could even see with his own eyes what the black shadow meant by the coming of the general trend. That was why he had to walk two paths at the same time. One was to ensure the healthy development of human civilization and ensure that there would be no internal problems. The second was to speed up the development of human civilization and allow humans to have enough combat power to face any challenges. At this moment, Xia Qian walked up to him. "Thank you, Commander Xia. I urgently need to complete the identity verification and obtain the authorization to access the database. Come with me to the command room first." Xia Qian immediately responded. Looking at the shelter residents who were busy cleaning up on the square, Feng Qi nodded. Then he followed Xia Qian back to the command room. Xia Qian took off his armor and sat down in front of the desk. He then looked at him and asked curiously, "Can you tell me why you urgently need an identity verification account? What information do you want to see?" "Some of the techniques that are blocked in the database, as well as some historical information." "How do you know that the technique information in the shelter is blocked? Why do you want to see historical information?" Hearing his explanation, Xia Qian was even more curious. "Because every time I check the technique information in the database, I'm restricted by the authorization." Feng Qi could not help but roll his eyes. "When did you enter the Star City Sanctuary?" Hearing Feng Qi's explanation, Xia Qian could not help but be surprised. At this time, all the domain-lurking creatures in the shelter had been cleared, and there was no super-domain creature like the Lord of the Mist that he expected to exist. Therefore, facing Xia Qian's question, Feng Qi did not plan to hide his identity anymore. His bone pulse ability was activated, and his bones were deformed and restored. A few seconds later, he returned to his original appearance. Looking at the shocked Xia Qian, Feng Qi smiled faintly. "Now do you know who I am?" Feng Qi. Before he could respond, the arrogant voice of the narrator sounded in his mind. "It's me, your ancestor. I'm still alive. Hurry up and kowtow twice to liven things up." Chapter 186. Looking at Feng Qi, who suddenly changed his appearance, Xia Qian opened his mouth and suddenly looked at the portrait on the right wall. "Don't look at it, it's me." Feng Qi grinned. Hearing this, Xia Qian still couldn't believe that Feng Qi, who claimed to have the same name as the great man, was the same Feng Qi who established the Breaking Dawn organization in history. He had read the biography of Feng Qi, written by the predecessors of the Breaking Dawn organization dozens of times. So he clearly knew that Feng Qi died in the execution ground of the future city as early as 1,500 years ago. At that time, countless people saw Feng Qi's execution through the live broadcast or at the scene. This history obviously couldn't be fake. Even if Feng Qi didn't die at that time, it was impossible for him to live until today, 1,500 years later. Thinking of this, Xia Qian's expression gradually became solemn. Don't joke with me with your little trick of changing your appearance. Facing Xia Qian's doubts, Feng Qi completely understood. He did die on the sacrifice line, and he died in front of everyone's eyes. How could he be resurrected? How to prove it now? He was in a dilemma. The problem returned to the same problem he encountered before coming to the sanctuary city. How to prove that he was him? How do you want me to prove it? Thinking of this, he threw the question back to Xia Qian. Looking at the serious Feng Qi, Xia Qian was so angry that he laughed. If it weren't for the fact that he felt indebted to Feng Qi for Star City Sanctuary, he would definitely lock him up in the detention room for a month to let him know that the great man couldn't be joked about. Realizing that Xia Qian still didn't believe him, Feng Qi was speechless. He immediately asked in his mind, "Narrator, is there a way for me to prove myself? Why don't you transform into your megabyte form and arm wrestle with him? Let's agree in advance that whoever wins will be the winner. Use the most primitive strength of a real man to determine the winner. You can't go back on your word." Hearing the narrator's serious ridicule, he spat in his mind. While feeling helpless, he looked at Xia Qian and said, "You can ask me any question you want, as long as it's related to Feng Qi. This doesn't prove anything. Who hasn't read Feng Qi's history? You can ask about the very unpopular historical information related to Feng Qi." Hearing this, Xia Qian didn't seem to want to play with him any longer. "Since you said that you are Feng Qi, do you know that Feng Qi was secretly interrogated before his death? When he was questioned as to why he established Breaking Dawn, what was his answer?" In the face of the question, Feng Qi thought carefully and a smile appeared on his face. "The ending has yet to be seen. I just want to strive for an ideal future before the dust settles." Wrong. Feng Qi's answer at that time was, "I hope that future generations can still feel the warmth of the sun when they look up at the sky and see the bright stars when they look up at the night sky." Feng Qi. I'm dying of laughter. Don't you know Feng Qi? You don't know Feng Qi at all, and you still want to act cool in front of me, someone who has studied Feng Qi for decades. Slap, 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 slap. Looking at Xia Qian, who said these words with a serious expression, Feng Qi rolled his eyes in his mind. This made it impossible for him to continue to prove himself. If history was the standard, whatever he said might not be right. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at Xia Qian. "Your ancestor Xia Long was my student. The topic of the first lesson I taught him was about the future. Is this recorded in your genealogy? My ancestor was a warrior. He never wrote a diary. Why would a decent person write dates?" This is very much in line with Xia Long's boorish character. Now that the fact that you're a fake Feng Qi has been proven, don't use fake news that isn't recorded in historical records to fool people. Hearing the narrator's ridicule, Feng Qi spat in his mind. Just as he was thinking about how to prove himself in another way, Xia Qian suddenly spoke. "Actually, there's a very simple way to prove whether you're Feng Qi or not. Tell me in detail." Feng Qi once underwent rune modification. A fierce shadow rune crystal was embedded in his chest. If you're Feng Qi, this rune crystal should still be embedded in your chest. Even if it has been removed, there should still be a mark. Feng Qi. Xia Qian was telling the truth, but it made it even harder for him to prove himself. "My goodness, why don't you just admit that you're fake? Now that the descendants of the Scarlet Research Institute have deleted the memories related to you, there's no way to prove that you have the ability to travel through timelines. It's better to leave some key information for the next timeline." When he heard the narrator's words, he couldn't help but sigh in his mind. Then he looked at Xia Qian and said, "I can understand why Xia Long and the others want to hide the fact that I have the ability to travel through timelines. If the domain forces hiding in the human civilization know about this, they will definitely plan to target me in advance. However, I still have to tell you that I am Feng Qi. Wait, you said you have the ability to travel through time. Xiaqian suddenly said with a serious expression. Seeing the change in Xiaqian's expression, he was also stunned. He felt that Xiaqian might have heard of this before. Just as he thought there was a chance, Xiaqian suddenly said, "Try it on and let me see." Hearing the narrator's laughter, he decisively chose to give up. "Okay, just treat it as a joke. Don't take it seriously. Please give me an account as soon as possible. I need to check some information through the database. Don't joke like this in the future. It's not fun at all." Xiaqian also let out a sigh of relief. Then he pointed at the display on his desk and said, "The shelter is currently in the process of cleaning up. Now the shelter is being cleaned up after the war. If you want to find any information, you can find it here. My screen is connected to the Star City database." As Xiaqian spoke, he reached out his right hand and swiped across the display. Suddenly, a line of words appeared on the display. Then, the screen entered the database search interface. Seeing this, Feng Qi immediately sat down at the desk without hesitation. Next, he tapped on the search bar on the screen and entered his name. After filtering the information about his character appeared. The words "great historical figure" appeared behind his name. After checking the account, other than his personal information, he also found a lot of video information related to him. As he was browsing, one of the videos caught his attention. He was familiar with Xia Long and Jia Yi's figures on the cover of the video. The title of the video was, "If You Ask Me What the Meaning of the Existence of Historical Heroes Is." After looking through Feng Qi's information, I can tell you very clearly that heroes are the eternal lighthouses in history, allowing future generations to move forward without being lost. This video pays tribute to Feng Qi and his companions. He clicked on the video and found that it was his funeral. Xia Long, Jia Yi, and the others carried his coffin. Along the way, it was surrounded by future city residents who came to send him off. He did not look at his funeral in detail and immediately closed the video. He had a general understanding of the sacrificial line. After browsing for a while, he closed the introduction page and entered Lin Rant's name. After filtering, information related to Lin Rant appeared on the screen. In this future line, Lin Rant's trajectory did not change at all. Without Wang Jinxing's participation, he obviously became the best choice for the Lord of Mist to set up the future. The flesh sacrifice finally appeared. Xiaqian, who was standing aside, could not help but ask when he saw this, "Why are you looking for information about these historical figures? Have you cultivated the flesh sacrifice?" Feng Qi immediately turned to look at him and asked, "Everyone has cultivated it, including the territory forces who are lurking in the base. This god-level technique has been improved many times. It can be called the #1 cultivation technique among humans." Hearing this, Feng Qi could not help but sigh in his heart. Actually, it doesn't matter whether they've cultivated it or not. The flesh sacrifice should be a bloodline technique. Even if their ancestors have cultivated it, their descendants can't escape from it. Now, we can only hope that old Lin can take over the Lord of Mist's body. Then, he won't be able to snap his fingers. Or maybe we can wait for Lao Wang to solve the hidden problem of the flesh sacrifice. We should focus on solving it. What if the Lord of Mist and other clansmen know how to activate the flesh sacrifice? By then, even if Lin Rant successfully takes over the Lord of Mist, we'll still lose. You're right. Why are you asking this? Xiaqian asked curiously. Faced with Xiaqian's question, Feng Qi did not intend to hide it. He immediately explained the reason. The flesh sacrifice technique is essentially a bloodline trap set by the domain powers for us humans. There is a huge hidden danger hidden within. As long as the domain powers want to, they can turn the humans who have cultivated this technique and their descendants into flesh and blood sacrifices at any time. Hearing this, Xiaqian was stunned. Where did you hear this false information from? The flesh sacrifice technique has been verified multiple times by the Tiger Soul Institute. It has also been verified for thousands of years. There shouldn't be any problems. Tiger Soul Institute? This institute has been controlled by the territory forces for a long time. The situation is similar to the Technology Research Institute. First, tell me, where did you get this information from? Xiaqian's expression was solemn. It was obvious that he was suspicious of the information he had provided. I once saw the Lord of Mist, who controlled the hidden problem of the flesh sacrifice technique, destroy human civilization with my own eyes. So, you still want to tell me that you're Feng Qi, that you have the ability to travel through time, and that you once saw the destruction of human civilization with your own eyes? That's right. Hearing this again, Xiaqian's gaze toward Feng Qi became uncertain. After taking a deep breath, Xiaqian suppressed the throbbing in his heart and asked, "Can you tell me why Baitong relies on you so much?" Faced with the question, Feng Qi rubbed the head of the suction cup. "The Baitong you speak of is actually Mu Qing's clone. Her dependence on me is inherited from Mu Qing. The shattered runic crystal on her right arm that has lost its luster is the one that was lost from Mu Qing's body." Hearing this, Xiaqian's heart was in turmoil. He was familiar with history and naturally knew that Mu Qing was extremely dependent on Feng Qi. Although there was no love between them, this kind of dependence was greater than love. It was like a safe haven. No matter how perilous the outside world was, Feng Qi was her spiritual sustenance. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was her spiritual faith. If Baitong was really Mu Qing's clone, then it made sense that she had inherited Mu Qing's instinctive dependence on Feng Qi. "You are really Ancestor Feng Qi?" "I am." Feng Qi nodded solemnly. Xiaqian took a deep breath in an attempt to calm his emotions. The way he looked at him changed. "I have a lot of questions in my heart. Can you answer them for me?" He glanced at the screen. Right now, he wanted to use his time to look up information and techniques. The apocalypse could come any time. Time was precious. But when he remembered that he still needed to ask Xiaolong for help, he still spoke. "Hurry up. I might not have much time left." Hearing this, Xiaqian immediately picked up a chair and sat down beside him. He began to ask about his situation. Faced with the question, Feng Qi did not hide anything. He briefly recounted the first time he traveled to the future and saw the apocalypse, as well as his subsequent attempts to change the future. Hearing him talk about the struggles in the various timelines, Xiaqian's expression kept changing. When he learned that human civilization would eventually be destroyed, his expression was extremely conflicted. "I once thought that human civilization might be destroyed in my hands, but I didn't expect it to be so." At this moment, Xiaqian shed his strong facade in front of him. In an instant, he seemed to have aged a lot. "Don't tell these secrets to anyone else in the shelter," Feng Qi said. "I understand. I don't want them to feel despair in advance." "I'm sorry for making you feel despair in advance," Feng Qi said with a complicated expression. "Although I'm not the leader of humans, I'm still the leader of tens of thousands of people in this shelter. I can bear this burden." As soon as he finished speaking, Xiaqian looked at him and said, "Ancestor Feng Qi, since you've told me so much, you must have something you need my help with. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to tell me these secrets." Looking at the suction cup in his arms, he nodded solemnly. "I hope you can open the resource vault for me. I need to replenish White Eye's energy." If he said this before Xiaqian knew his secret, Xiaqian would definitely be angry. After all, the resource vault that stored food and energy crystals was the most important thing to maintain order in the shelter. If there was a problem with the resource vault, the shelter's internal circulation system would be completely broken. Asking for a large amount of food was undoubtedly cutting off the lifeblood of the shelter survivors. But knowing that the end of the world was near, Xiaqian understood what Feng Qi wanted to do. He immediately nodded. "Would you plan to go get it?" "Not now. I still don't know when the end of the world will come in this timeline. It might be a few hours later or a few days later. I can't touch the food now. You can only open it to me when the end of the world comes." "Okay." Although his heart was heavy, Xiaqian quickly adjusted himself. In the following time, he turned around and left the command room. He didn't want to disturb Xiaqian looking through the information. Feng Qi decisively took the time to open the skill vault. As his eyes scanned, he chose a 5-star rated skill, Boundless. After he clicked on the details page, he entered into a state of full concentration to study. A 5-star rated skill was far more complicated than the 1-star to 3-star cultivation skills that Feng Qi had learned before. Fortunately, his memory was now much better than before. He felt that it wouldn't be a problem for him to spend several times the amount of time to memorize this 5-star rated cultivation technique. Time passed quickly as he memorized. After an unknown amount of time, Xia Qian's figure rushed into the command room. The first thing he said when he looked at Xia Qian was, "Ancestor Feng Qi, the expansion of the territory field has suddenly accelerated. I think the end of the world is coming. Hurry up and bring the suction cup to gain experience. Then we'll know if old Lin succeeded in anti-parasitizing. If he failed, let the suction cup beat him up." Chapter 187. Feng Qi's heart sank when he heard Xia Qian say that the field suddenly accelerated its expansion. "Open the granary." He immediately stood up. "Follow me," Xia Qian said, and walked out of the command room. Feng Qi saw this and immediately followed. He knew that the end would come sooner or later. But he did not give up on the kindling of humanity in the shelter. Flesh sacrifice had not been deciphered yet. The only person who could save humanity in the future seemed to be Lin Ran. But he would not sit still and wait for fate to decide. There was still a way to save the people in the future. It would help the suction cup recover. If Lin Ran failed to parasitize her consciousness successfully, the suction cup would try to kill the Lord of the Fog before he snapped his fingers. He was not sure about the success rate. He was not even sure if the suction cup could fight against the Lord of Mist. But no matter what, he wanted to try. He did not want to give up on humanity's last hope. He followed Xia Qian out of the command room. Outside, the commanders of the battle groups were gathering their members and going to the surface through the metal tunnel. From their expressions, Feng Qi knew that they were ready to sacrifice themselves. Although the Star City Sanctuary had a complete internal circulation system, the number of residents was obviously overloaded. Usually, other than the internal circulation of food and resources, the warriors in the shelter had to go out and search for resources. These warriors clearly knew that with their abilities, they could not stop the expansion of the field. But dying in battle was their choice. He did not lament too much. He followed Xia Qian through the crowd and came to the metal gate on the west side of the shelter. Xia Qian reached out and swiped the detector outside the metal gate. Suddenly, the heavy metal gate slowly retracted into the wall on the right. There was an inner door made of special metal inside the metal gate. After another identity verification, the inner door also moved into the metal wall. "The resources are inside. Take whatever you want. I have to go prepare now." "Okay." Feng Qi immediately nodded. Xia Qian then turned and left. Feng Qi was about to step into the room when he saw the open door of the weapons room. There were cold weapons inside. Knives, swords, spears, rods, halberds, all kinds of cold weapons were placed against the wall. He was no stranger to this armory. He still remembered clearly that he had found a mysterious scroll in this weapons room. Inside was a landscape painting of mountains and rivers. In the center of the painting were 3 gilded words, "Heavenly Painting." At that time, he even suspected that this scroll might be related to the heavenly path. Now that Hansen thought about it, this mysterious scroll was most likely left behind by a territory creature lurking in God's sanctuary. But now that all the territory creatures in the shelter had been killed, he did not have the time to find out where the scroll came from. After a short pause, he immediately stepped through the iron gate. As the sensor lights lit up one by one, he walked down the long and narrow tunnel for about 50 meters. He pushed open the iron door at the end of the tunnel, and cold air immediately hit him. In front of him was a cold storage. Rows of shelves were neatly arranged on both sides of the middle passage. Every drawer was marked with a text message: potato seeds, sorghum seeds, rice seeds. A large number of seed samples were stored in the huge cold storage. Although the end of the world was near, these seed samples were still preserved. Seeing this scene, Feng Qi's heart was heavy. Obviously, the human survivors were still looking forward to the day when they could return to the surface. At that time, They could spread these seed samples and let the plants that belong to this world bloom again in the new world. After walking down the middle passage for about 100 meters, he came to the end of the cold storage. He reached out and pushed open the iron door at the end. The sensor lights in front of him suddenly lit up and illuminated the space. What appeared in front of him was a huge warehouse. The warehouse was divided into two halves. The left side stored food. Each type of food was separated by transparent glass. Each partition had a display screen attached to the glass. The display screen was marked with information related to the food, as well as the temperature in the glass compartment, oxygen content, and other information. This automatic detection device would detect the stored food in real time and adjust the temperature and oxygen content in the storage glass compartment to eliminate possible problems such as pests. The right side of the warehouse was divided into two parts. In front of it were various energy crystals neatly arranged. In addition to the spirit particles in the air that were artificially extracted and purified to make spirit blocks, these energy crystals were also placed with spirit stones produced by the territory field, as well as various other rare ores that contained spirit energy. At the back were metal jars that were more than 2 meters tall, neatly arranged. There were more than 10 of them. From the labels on the metal jars, he knew that the jars stored spirit liquids that were extracted from spirit plants. The suction cup that had been lying on Feng Qi's chest also opened her eyes at this time. After sniffing twice, her eyes lit up. He rubbed the head of the suction cup and immediately said, "Suction cup, dry rice." The suction cup slid down his body at this time. After her feet landed on the ground, she suddenly pounced on the resource warehouse on the right. The transparent glass used to separate the warehouse was instantly shattered by her. The first target she chose was a metal jar that stored spirit liquids. Then, she crashed into it. The spirit liquids flowed out of the broken hole, accompanied by a rich medicinal fragrance. Feng Qi heard the gulp sound of the suction cup swallowing hard. Your portable suction cup is being strengthened. Experience plus 100. Experience plus 100. Ignoring the narrator's ridicule, he looked at the neatly arranged spirit stones. Before the bloodline advancement, he didn't have a digestive organ, so he couldn't swallow food like the suction cup to make himself stronger or replenish the energy progress bar. However, this problem no longer existed after he completed his bloodline advancement. Now that there were a large number of spirit stones in front of him, he wanted to try to improve his strength or recharge his energy progress bar. Thinking of this, he immediately came to the neatly stacked spirit stones, reached out, and picked up a light golden spirit stone that was faintly glowing. He put it in his mouth and took a bite. With the support of the tough teeth talent, a small piece of the hard spirit stone was easily bitten off by him like tofu. After chewing and swallowing, he could clearly feel the spirit energy surging in his body along with his blood, surging to his limbs and bones. But a similar situation as when he was cultivating soon appeared. The spirit energy that entered his body quickly dissipated outside of his body and couldn't be absorbed by his body at all. As for the energy progress bar, there was no change at all. He immediately came to a metal jar unwillingly and reached out to press the switch on the screen. Suddenly, a light green liquid sprayed out from the valve on the metal jar. He immediately bent down and put his mouth on it. As he continued to swallow, he soon felt full. His body quickly digested the spirit liquid. He felt that his blood was abundant, and his strength was steadily increasing. But the bloodline evolution points didn't change, and the energy progress bar didn't show any fluctuations. If I'm not wrong, you can increase your strength through other methods other than killing domain creatures. Although the energy progress bar didn't change, I can feel that my strength has obviously increased. Feng Qi immediately frowned. Remember that we once guessed that the talent you obtained from robbing domain creatures allowed you to travel through time, but the increase in strength obtained through other methods can't be the same as the talent and travel through time with you. In other words, I can't take away the increase in blood energy from swallowing the spirit liquid. That should be it. Otherwise, the increase in blood energy should be reflected in your bloodline evolution points. It's impossible that there are no changes in your attributes. After hearing the explanation, he felt depressed. You don't have Mu Qing's ability to become stronger by swallowing spirit ores and spirit liquid. Even if you can become stronger by swallowing spirit ores and spirit liquid, your digestive ability can't keep up. It's impossible to rely on swallowing to become stronger in a short period of time. Just as he was about to reply, Suction Cup's figure drilled out of the metal jar. The jade-colored light on the surface of her body flickered, and the green liquid on her body slid down. Suction Cup opened her mouth and burped, then looked at the other metal jars. A new round of Tao Ye's eating began again. Suction Cup, who inherited a strong digestive ability, was like a bottomless pit. The spirit liquid she ate would be digested in a short period of time, allowing her to eat almost endlessly. The rune crystal on her arm, which was originally covered in cracks and dim light, gradually healed under the abundant energy. Looking at Suction Cup that was strengthening at a speed visible to the naked eye, Feng Qi was shocked once again. I really want to know what kind of domain creature left behind this rune crystal. It actually has such a terrifying ability. Maybe it's a domain creature stronger than Xiao He. There's limited information, so I can't analyze it. But I think if you kill Suction Cup, you'll definitely obtain the ability to become stronger by swallowing. Hearing this, he could not help but roll his eyes. The creatures he killed were very likely to be erased from the timeline. Even if he really had the ability to kill Suction Cup, he would not do so. Otherwise, Suction Cup and even Mu Qing might be erased from the timeline forever. Looking at Suction Cup, who was still eating heartily, Feng Qi, who already felt full, could only stand aside and wait anxiously. Now, he could only hope that the expansion of the domain would not be too fast. Let him have time to make a final struggle, even if the outcome would not be as he wished. At this moment, outside the shelter, the blood moon hung high in the sky, and, as the domain expanded, it pressed the sun to the other side. It was as if the whole world was upside down. The balance between the two worlds, which were originally clearly separated, was being broken bit by bit. The real world was quickly being eaten away by the domain world. The sky became bright and dark because of this, and from time to time, electric arcs and cracks appeared, but they quickly disappeared and healed. In the area covered by the domain, the flowers, plants, and trees all withered. It was as if they had experienced the erosion of time in an instant. Along with the expansion of the domain, there was a change in the domain. The earth trembled violently, and countless domain creatures seemed to be attracted by some kind of will. As the domain expanded, it pressed in the direction of Star City Sanctuary. At this moment, a space vortex appeared in the sky. Domain creatures of various forms emerged from it, and among them, there were many super creatures with powerful auras. There was a mountainous beast whose body was as large as a mountain, and half of its body was covered by clouds. There was a thunder creature that could easily control the power of thunder and lightning with the descent of electric arcs. There was a strange domain creature that could continuously split its body into strange shapes. Amidst the roars, the domain world launched a final battle with the real world. At this moment, another space vortex appeared in the sky in the west, and thick gray fog spewed out from it. At this moment, the Lord of Fog also appeared, leading countless ferocious spirits towards the direction of Star City Sanctuary. The shelter warriors who had already gathered in the city looked at the terrifying scene before the end of the world. Fear of the unknown appeared on their faces, but there was also a determination to fight to the death in their eyes. At this moment, on the city, Xia Qian, who was wearing silver-white armor, looked at the endless domain beast tide that stretched for miles. A sense of helplessness rose in his heart. Just as Feng Qi said, they would be the last flame of human civilization. They had no chance of winning this battle. He reached out and gripped the sword in his hand tightly and said in a deep voice, "This battle, we will not retreat." Everyone was afraid of death, but there were some things that were more important to Xia Qian and the warriors. At this moment, Xia Qian also pressed the war mode on his wrist. All kinds of weapons placed in the city were instantly activated. The drone cluster was the first to rise in the city, heading in the direction of the domain expansion and transmitting the scene in front. Then, the carpet bombing began. Amidst the deafening sound, the city was filled with flames, and all the war machines entered a state of high-load operation. For a short time, the invasion of the domain beast tide was suppressed. But soon, the beast tide broke through the area covered by the firepower and continued to devour the real world with the expansion of the domain. Among them, there was a bat-like domain beast with wings that braved the firepower and passed through the area covered by the firepower. It went straight to the top of the shelter. But before it could attack, an invisible force grabbed it by the neck. A human warrior reached out and pointed at it. With a violent wave of his hand, the domain beast's body shattered. At the city gate, the warriors who had already formed a formation looked coldly at the approaching beast tide. Feeling the tremors of the ground, they clenched the weapons in their hands. They knew what was waiting for them, and they had also thought that this day would come. But they were still shocked by the scene in front of them. It was as if they were witnessing the collapse of the world. They could clearly feel their own insignificance. In the face of the power of heaven and earth, it seemed that all struggles were futile. At this moment, on the right side of the battle formation, a burly man in black armor, standing alone in front of the formation, turned his head to look at the warriors behind him and grinned. "Tell me, are you afraid?" "Captain, we're not afraid." The warriors standing behind him shouted one after another. "Not afraid, my ass. Even I'm afraid. How can you not be afraid?" The man in black armor could not help but laugh. "But do you know why we can't retreat and why we can't hide in the shelter?" Looking at the familiar faces, the man in black armor continued. "Because we are the elites. If the sky falls, we must be at the forefront. If human civilization is going to be destroyed, we elites should be the first to die in battle. This is the spirit we have always believed in." The man in black armor glanced at the faces of his subordinates and said in a deep voice, "As powerhouses, as warriors, as elites, while you enjoy flowers and praise, this is your duty. You should be proud to be standing here because you are the elites." Hearing the man in black armor's words, the warrior's eyes were filled with determination. Turning to look forward, the man in black armor in the lead drew the sword on his back, pointed at the endless beast tide, and roared, "Destiny Battle Group, fight!" At this moment, the ground trembled violently. All the warriors of the Destiny Battle Group raised their weapons. A drop of water in the long river of history set off great waves. Today, 1,500 years later, a huge wave was formed. Chapter 188. Star City Sanctuary. Resource Vault. Feng-Chi was still waiting anxiously. At this time, the sucker had finished all the plant's spiritual liquid in the metal tank. She looked at the neatly arranged spiritual stones, but after tasting them, she seemed to be unsatisfied with the taste of the spiritual stones and turned to the granary. After smashing the transparent glass, she began a new round of feasting. Her body was also changing as she ate. The rune crystal that was originally full of cracks on her arm had been mostly repaired. As the energy continued to pour in, it was flashing with a scarlet light. There was a hint of intelligence in his dull eyes. At this moment, Suction Cup, who was munching on corn kernels, suddenly turned his head to look at Feng-Chi. His puffed-up cheeks made him look extremely adorable. "How many? Loyalty. Eat." "I'm not eating." "You eat and recover your strength quickly." Seeing the sucker stop eating, he hurriedly urged her. The territory was expanding rapidly. By then, the Lord of Mist would definitely come. Even if the special stone tablet outside Star City Sanctuary had locked the exit, the hidden danger of the flesh sacrifice was not resolved. As long as the Lord of Mist activated the switch, the human survivors in the sanctuary were like marionettes. They would be forced to walk out of the sanctuary and eventually sacrifice their flesh and blood to become nutrients for the Lord of Mist. Other than Lin Ran, who was unpredictable, the sucker was his only way to fight against the Lord of Mist. As if realizing that he was unwilling to eat together, the sucker with puffed-up cheeks turned around and buried her head in the corn. Then, she swam around like a bulldozer with her, but in the air. The pile of corn was sinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. If the sucker wanted to heal her injuries, the best choice was to eat spiritual stones. Compared to various grains, spiritual stones contained abundant spiritual energy. It was easier to absorb and transform into the energy needed to heal injuries. However, the sucker had obviously inherited Mu Qing's gluttony attribute. At this time, she did not have a sense of impending doom in her mind. She was just following her instinct to eat. Compared to the tasteless spiritual stones, the food in the granary became her instinctive choice. At this moment, Feng Qi, who was standing to the side, couldn't wait to grab the spirit stones and stuff them into the sucker's mouth one by one so that she could recover her strength as soon as possible. You could try. Although you can't defeat the suckers, they won't hurt you. Feng Qi was stunned when he heard the narrator's reminder. So be it. Without hesitation, he immediately went to the area where the spirit stones were piled up. He grabbed 2 high-purity golden spirit stones, ran to the sucker, and pulled it out of the corn kernels. Holding the cute-looking sucker, he stuffed the spirit stone into the sucker's mouth. Swallow it. The sucker obediently chewed twice. Just when he thought that this method would work, the sucker suddenly opened its mouth. Bah! Tisk tsk tsk. Why is this weapon so picky? It's probably spoiled. Give a beating. Forget it, I can't beat it. Looking at the sucker that spat out all the spirit stone fragments in its mouth, Feng Qi felt helpless, but he still decisively threw the sucker back into the corn silo. As the sucker continued to eat, he looked at the metal door at the end of the resource room. Waiting was a waste of time. He felt that there might be other high-energy food there. Thinking of this, he walked to the metal door at the end and reached out to push the metal door. The metal door was very heavy. Even with Feng Qi's strength, it was very difficult to push it open. Therefore, he decisively switched to his battle form. The heavy feeling instantly disappeared, and the metal door slowly opened under his brute force. Suddenly, a rolling heat wave hit him in the face. What appeared in front of him was a golden ball as dazzling as the sun. It was suspended in the air on a ring full of electromagnetic coils, spinning rapidly. The entire room's floor and walls were covered with thick cables. Narrator, is this golden ball the energy room that provides the shelter's operation? Forgive me for not being educated, but I only know that this thing is releasing energy at a very high frequency. As for what this thing is, I really don't know, but maybe your guess is right. Wait, this thing is not right. While it's releasing energy, it's also releasing some kind of signal similar to spatial coordinates. What do you mean? He quickly asked. Do you remember that I once told you that there was a looming spatial node coordinate information far to the east? Yes, I do. Is it related to this golden ball? I now suspect that the signal I sensed before might be emitted by a special energy aggregation similar to this golden ball. Tell me in detail. Is this thing good or bad? Feng Qi, who was confused, quickly asked. Do you remember the Scarlet Institute's anti-infiltration plan? Yes, the Scarlet Institute wants to use this plan to transport powerhouses to the world where the domain creatures are. Then, they will look for the spatial source and completely cut off the connection between the domain world and our world. This way, they will save the world. That's right. The source that the Scarlet Institute wants to cut off is actually the spatial connection between the two worlds. In the Scarlet Institute's idea, there are no spatial nodes in the real world, which proves that the connection between the domain world and the real world is one way. The domain world can directly send creatures to the real world where we are, so they have to go to the domain world to cut off the spatial source. After seeing this golden ball, I think the Scarlet Institute's idea might be wrong. The connection between the domain world and the real world is not one way. Instead, it's more like a bridge with piers at both ends. These piers are the spatial nodes, but these spatial nodes are hidden. The golden ball in front of us might be one of the spatial nodes, which is why it's constantly releasing spatial coordinate signals. After listening to the narrator's explanation, Feng Qi's expression changed as he looked at the golden ball. Does that mean that as long as this golden ball is destroyed, the spatial bridge will collapse, and the domain world will no longer be able to establish a connection with the real world and devour the real world? It's too late. For example, you're a fugitive, real world, and I'm a police officer, domain world. I'm tracking you through the positioning device, spatial node coordinates. If you had blocked the signal earlier, I wouldn't have been able to catch you. However, 1,500 years later, I'm already right in front of your face, and one of your hands is already handcuffed by me. What's the use of blocking the positioning signal now? The narrator's analogy was very vivid, and he immediately understood what was going on. Besides, it's useless to only destroy one spatial node. Each spatial node is an independent and complete signal device. Unless you destroy all of them, it's useless. After hearing this, Feng Qi's idea of saving the world by finding and destroying the golden ball immediately dissipated. However, he still had many doubts in his mind. Why would the spatial node connected to the real world become the energy source of the Star City Sanctuary? He felt that perhaps only Xia Qian knew the answer to this question. Thinking of this, he stopped trying to figure out what was going on with the golden ball and left the room decisively, closing the heavy metal door behind him. Suddenly, the heat wave was blocked, and the temperature in the air suddenly dropped. When he returned to the resource warehouse, the sucker had already finished the piled-up corn kernels and pounced on the pile of compressed energy biscuits. The scarlet rune crystal that originally had cracks on her arm had mostly healed at this time. The jade-colored mist on the surface of her body continued to grow while she was eating. The changes in the sucker were clearly visible, and even her eating speed had increased by a lot. At this time, the sucker's eyes were no longer dull, and there was a hint of intelligence in them. However, she still did not seem to have recovered her lost memories. Driven by instinct, she continued to eat food to obtain the energy needed to repair her body's injuries. Listening to the crisp chewing sound of the sucker, Feng Qi was extremely anxious. From the timeline of the last time he came into contact with the people from the future, he saw the territory beast horde that came with the expansion of the domain. This time, there would obviously be no accidents. The human soldiers outside the sanctuary could not stop the expansion of the territory beast horde at all. The only humans who could survive would also be sacrificed along with the arrival of the Lord of Mist. How could he allow the same ending to happen again? Aside, how long do you think it will take for the sucker to fully recover? I'm not sure. I can't see where the upper limit of this scarlet rune crystal is. Maybe when the sucker recovers to its perfect state, everything will be over. Then, do you think the sucker's current combat power can fight the Lord of Mist? Judging from the amount of energy in the body, the sucker should have the ability to fight the Lord of Mist, but the Lord of Mist may have other trump cards, and I can't be 100% sure. Let's do it. Time was running out, and he did not hesitate. He immediately went to the pile of compressed energy biscuits, grabbed one of the sucker's legs, and dragged it out. The sucker was very dissatisfied with this, and it kept flopping and doing sit-ups in the air. But as if it was afraid of hurting him, the sucker was obviously pulling back when it struggled. Her mouth was stuffed with biscuit crumbs, and her cheeks were puffed up. Her body was like a mantis shrimp bouncing in Feng Qi's hand, and her hands grabbed the compressed energy biscuits in the air and stuffed them into her mouth. The absorption automatic combat weapon has been forcibly equipped. The weapon has been strengthened. Level increased by plus 99. Combat power increased by a bunch of zeros. But the weapon is strongly protesting, and it wants me to tell the host that it's not full at all, and it wants me to have another big bowl. Ignoring the aside's complaints, he reached out and grabbed the sucker. Ignoring her struggling, he ran towards the sanctuary square with her. The sucker lying on her chest reached out with its tender little hand and grabbed at the food in the resource warehouse a few times, and a trace of glistening appeared at the corner of her mouth. He left the resource warehouse through the passage he came from. At this time, the underground square was very empty, and all the soldiers had gone to the surface. The rest of the sanctuary residents had also hidden in the residential area on the third underground floor of the sanctuary. Without thinking, he immediately ran to the metal passage leading to the surface with the sucker. On the surface, the beast tide was approaching, and the soldiers at the front line of the sanctuary city were on high alert. This was destined to be a battle of completely unequal strength. Feng Qi sacrificed time and time again in the future line in exchange for the arrival of the end of the world one step later, but it was only one step later. When the beast tide and the human battle formation collided, a fierce battle began. There was once a human scholar who prophesied the future. He said that when our cultivation system was perfect enough and we could choose from a variety of 5-star rated cultivation methods with different system characteristics, the future would be under our control. At that time, the starting point of our future cultivation might be the end point that modern humans could not reach in their lifetime. When that day comes, the human race will prosper, and there will be no need to fear the invasion of the domain. Part of the prophecy became a reality today, 1,500 years later. After more than 1,500 years of development, the human warriors in the future had a far more perfect cultivation system than 1,500 years ago, allowing them to have a higher starting point and a higher cultivation limit. But on this day, the human race did not rise as expected. The once prosperous city turned into ruins on this day. The ground was full of cracks and all the plants withered. Even the sky was torn apart by black lines. The sun that symbolized light was suppressed by the blood moon and kept sinking, no longer able to bring light and heat to the world. All of this was the opposite of the ideal human future. The soldiers at the front line of the sanctuary waved their weapons with all their might, outlining the trajectory of their spells. They had already seen their end, and they knew that this end could not be changed. So they turned the emotions in their hearts into anger and vented it on the beast tide. Figures constantly fell in the battle. Blood dyed the ground in front of the sanctuary city red, and also dyed the statues made of rune crystals red. In just half an hour, the human defense line completely collapsed. The beast tide continued to move forward, smashing through the metal walls outside the sanctuary city and madly destroying everything inside. But Star City Sanctuary was not the end of the beast tide. With the expansion of the domain, they turned into a torrent that crushed everything in the city, then continued to rush into the distance. About 10 minutes after the first wave of beast tide, the second wave arrived. They trampled over the already dilapidated city once more, then continued to advance in the direction of the expansion of the domain. At this time, there were more and more dimensional vortices in the sky. Various life forms of domain creatures kept emerging from them. When the second wave of beast tide left, one of the dimensional vortices in the sky slowly closed, and the last wisp of gray fog came out, surging into the sea of fog that had already gathered below. Inside the fog, countless evil spirits wailed. At this time, a clear face appeared in the fog, accompanied by a hoarse murmur. The sea of fog attacked in the direction of Star City Sanctuary. But just as the fog was about to engulf the ruins of Star City Sanctuary, Feng Qi walked out of the sanctuary passage with the suction cup. The fog pressed down on the city, and gray filled every corner of sight. Feng Qi raised his head and shouted, "Lin Ran, come out." After that, Feng Qi chose to switch to human form. Hearing his shouts, a face appeared in the gray mist and looked down at him. The face slowly approached, and Feng Qi was nervous. He hoped that Lin Ran could devour the Lord of Fog, and he also hoped that the future dream would be able to travel with him. The face formed by the mist was constantly changing its expression as if it was struggling. Sometimes it looked confused, and sometimes it looked down at him with murderous intent. The face in the fog gradually got closer, and it kept twisting and changing. "Brother Qi?" The face formed by the fog looked at Feng Qi and suddenly asked. At this time, the suction cup suddenly struggled to get free. Feng Qi was caught off guard and slid down. Then he suddenly jumped up high, clenched his right fist, and suddenly swung it at the Lord of Fog's face. The jade-colored mist on the surface of the suction cup followed the punch and formed a huge fist shadow in the air. Bam! A crisp sonic boom was heard, and the face formed by the fog was instantly dispersed. Beautiful! Feng Qi was speechless. Chapter 189. Looking at the rolling fog in the sky, Feng Qi felt helpless. Clearly, when Lin Ran was fighting for control of the body with the Lord of Fog, the Lord of Fog had the intention to kill him. The suction cup that sensed the killing intent was like a combat switch that was activated. It jumped up and punched the Lord of Fog. He looked up at the sky. At that moment, The face of fog that was scattered by the suction cup shrunk briefly and gathered again. When he saw this, he immediately looked at the face of fog and said, "Lin Ran, have you successfully anti-parasitized it?" Faced with his question, the expression of the face of fog kept twisting. "I'm trying to seize it. Its power is suppressing me." Before it finished speaking, the face of fog quickly twisted and became expressionless. At that moment, the Lord of Fog regained control of the body. Lin Ran's consciousness, which should have disappeared, reappeared and launched an anti-parasitic attack on the Lord of Fog. In addition, Feng Qi, who should have died 1,500 years ago, suddenly appeared in front of it. While the Lord of Fog was puzzled, it also realized that this had something to do with Feng Qi. "Feng Qi, you're not dead? What exactly are you planning?" Faced with the question, Feng Qi did not beat around the bush. He looked at the Lord of Fog and said arrogantly, "Of course, it's to kill you." Upon hearing this, the Lord of Fog's eyes revealed a murderous intent. "Kill me? You think you can smack?" Before the Lord of Fog finished speaking, the suction cup that sensed the killing intent leaped up again. The jade-colored energy gathered into a fist shadow and slammed heavily into the Lord of Fog's face. The area that was hit shrank inwards. It looked like the entire face was flattened and caved in by the punch. Immediately after, the jade-colored energy erupted. A gust of wind swept across the face of Fog and scattered it instantly. Beautiful, very satisfying. The fog in the sky gathered again after a short while. A hoarse voice came from the sky. "Brother Qi, what's going on?" "Aside, is he Lin Ran? I can sense that the original consciousness of the Lord of Fog has been suppressed. The one controlling the body now is a relatively weak consciousness. Don't worry, he is Lin Ran." After confirming that Lin Ran had regained the upper hand, he immediately looked up at the sky and shouted, "Lin Ran, do you have the confidence to seize this body now?" "Brother Qi, my consciousness isn't weak, but I lack mental attacks, so I'm no match for it." Hearing this, Feng Qi felt a little regretful. However, he was already mentally prepared. The Lord of Mist was clearly not an easy opponent. The first time, he asked Lin Ran to create a technique that could counteract consciousness parasitism. He tried to find an opportunity to seize the power of the Lord of Mist, but failed. The reason was that Lin Ran's consciousness, which was hidden in his sea of consciousness, was constantly being eroded by the Lord of Fog's mental power. He had to divert a portion of his power to resist the mental erosion, so he couldn't grow quickly. So when he returned to reality, he asked Lin Ran to develop a technique that could protect his consciousness. This was the closest Lin Ran was to successfully counterattack the Lord of Mist. According to the narration, Lin Ran's consciousness was not much smaller than the Lord of Mist. However, the problem was that Lin Ran did not master any mental attack techniques. This is equivalent to Lin Ran not having any combat weapons. He can only use his consciousness to collide with the Lord of Mist consciousness. His combat strength is greatly reduced. Next time, let Lin Ran develop a powerful mental attack technique. Or you can directly copy a mental attack technique with a 5-star rating from the future and teach it to Lin Ran. Next time, it will definitely work. Understood. At this moment, the face of the mist distorted again. Attention! The Lord of Mist consciousness is beginning to suppress Lin Ran. As soon as the narration finished, the face of the mist glared at him with an angry expression. However, before the Lord of Mist could speak, the suction cup, which sensed the killing intent again, leaped up and threw a punch at it again. Accompanied by the sound of sonic boom, the face of the mist was scattered again. "Brother Qi, aren't you already dead? Why are you here?" Lin Ran, who had regained control of the Lord of Mist's body, asked the question in his heart. Before his body was taken away by the Lord of Mist, he had learned of the bad news of Feng Qi's death. At this moment, when he saw Feng Qi again, he recalled how Feng Qi had solemnly instructed him to research a consciousness anti-parasitic spell and a cultivation technique that could protect his consciousness. He felt that his encounter was obviously within Feng Qi's expectations. The spells and cultivation techniques had become his secret weapon to preserve his consciousness. Faced with the question, Fengqi knew that Lin Ran was filled with doubts. Without hesitation, he immediately briefly described his ability to travel through the timeline to Lin Ran. After understanding the situation, Lin Ran looked at him and said, "Brother Qi, I need a mental attack technique. Brother Qi, I need a mental attack technique. If I can master an extremely powerful mental attack technique, I'm confident that I'll be able to completely possess it." Understood. Now, do your best to attack it. I'll let the suction cup cooperate with you. Okay, I won't let it have an easy time even if I die. As soon as he finished speaking, the face of the mist began to distort. The Lord of Mist's hoarse roar was heard. Clearly, Lin Ran's consciousness was colliding with the Lord of Mist's consciousness. At this moment, the suction cup also plunged into the mist. Soon, the mist was stirred up by the suction cup's power and turned into a rapidly spinning vortex that slowly moved toward the west. The suction cup and Lin Ran worked together to launch an attack on the Lord of Mist. At this time, the Lord of Mist's energy was restrained and could not activate the hidden dangers left behind by flesh sacrifice. The survivors in Star City Sanctuary were safe for the time being. In fact, until now, Fengqi still had a question in his mind that he could not figure out. The Lord of Mist promoted the cultivation method of flesh sacrifice in preparation to harvest all of humanity in the future. As long as he activated the hidden dangers, he could make humans become his flesh and blood sacrifices to strengthen himself. However, the question was why the Lord of Mist had not snapped his fingers for so long. In the course of 1,500 years of history, the human population had been declining continuously. Today, Star City, which originally had tens of millions of residents, only had tens of thousands of survivors left. Therefore, it did not make sense for the Lord of Mist to choose to activate the flesh sacrifice at this time. After preparing for more than 1,000 years, it did not use it when the benefits were maximized. Instead, it chose to use it when human civilization was close to destruction and when the population was at its lowest. This was clearly illogical. Regarding this, we can first rule out the possibility that the Lord of Mist is an idiot. Duh. Fengqi cannot help but roll his eyes. At this moment, he suddenly recalled what Xia Qian had said to him before. The territory creatures in the sanctuary were also cultivating flesh sacrifice, which was a body tempering technique. P.S. The relevant content is in Chapter 185. A clue suddenly appeared in his mind. He could not help but guess that the Lord of Mist's real target was not humans, but other territory forces lurking in human civilization. Thinking of this, he could not help but take a deep breath. His expression became very solemn. My goodness, your guess is probably correct. The Lord of the Mist is too ambitious. He wants to harvest all the forces in the other domains in one go. It seems like our previous guess was completely wrong. Humans are just collateral damage. This explains why the Lord of the Mist hasn't activated the hidden switch of the flesh sacrifice. After listening to the narration, another question in Fengqi's mind was answered. When he first entered the Star City Sanctuary, there were no territory creatures in it. However, according to the current information, the sanctuary should have been occupied by territory creatures with weak territory creatures. At that time, he did not carry the suction cup to clean the sanctuary. Thinking about how these domain creatures also practiced flesh sacrifice, the logic was clear. In the previous future dreamline, the territory creatures in the sanctuary were like humans and became nutrients for the Lord of Mist. Therefore, when he entered the sanctuary, there was no one. There were also no territory creatures lurking in there. The Lord of Mist's plan was undoubtedly successful. He used the flesh sacrifice to harvest the other territory forces. He could still clearly remember when the Lord of Mist activated the flesh sacrifice. Other than the survivors in the Star City Sanctuary, the Lord of Mist continued to absorb the blood-red clouds from all directions, becoming his nutrients. Other than the human survivors in other cities, there were also territory creatures in the blood-red clouds. F*CK. The Lord of Mist is too cunning. He planned for 1,000 years just for the final harvest. However, This kind of harvest shouldn't have much effect on the strong domain races. After all, the strong domain races all have their own innate abilities, which are far more profound than the foundational body tempering techniques like the flesh sacrifice. However, the lethality towards the weak domain races is extremely terrifying. We can basically wipe them all out and send them to hell with our human civilization. With the information in his mind, Feng Qi completely understood the Lord of Mist's plan. This made him eager to kill the Lord of Mist. If he did not travel through the timeline to collect information, he would not have thought that the Lord of Mist's final plan would be so terrifying. Thinking back to the future timeline, the Lord of Mist was still entrenched in the west and did not move forward. He had also wondered why the Lord of Mist was holed up there all this time. Now it seemed that the Lord of Mist was devouring the blood-red clouds that were coming from all directions. Its strength was also growing rapidly. Perhaps if the Lord of Mist was given enough time to devour all the flesh sacrifice, it would become unbelievably powerful. This child is terrifying. He must not be allowed to live. Hearing this, Feng Qi could not help but nod. At this time, the battle between the Suckers and the Lord of Mist was still ongoing. The Mist Sea was gradually moving to the west. Feng Qi wanted to join the battle, but he also knew that he would not be of any help in a battle of this level. Since there was still time, he decided to return to the sanctuary and choose a mind attack skill. It would help Lin Ran to possess the Lord of Mist. If he could not succeed the first time, he would succeed the second time. If he could not succeed the second time, he would succeed the third time. He believed that one day, Lin Ran would successfully possess the Lord of Mist and obtain all of its power. However, just as he turned around, several dimensional vortexes suddenly appeared above the Star City Sanctuary. These dimensional vortexes gradually expanded as they spun. Then countless humanoid figures fell from the sky like raindrops. These humanoid figures looked very similar to humans. The only difference was that their faces were branded with all kinds of twisted runes, making them look slightly ferocious. After these humanoid domain creatures landed, they stood where they were with blank expressions. Seeing this, Feng Qi was shocked. He had never experienced this situation before. He had no idea why these humanoid domain creatures had descended here. At this time, he decisively switched to battle form. Then, he swung his fist at a humanoid domain creature that had landed beside him. Since it was a domain creature, there was nothing to discuss. He just had to do it. The fist landed on its head and instantly sent it flying. It knocked down several humanoid domain creatures in succession. However, what surprised him was that the domain creature that had fallen to the ground still had a blank expression and did not counterattack. "Aside, what's going on?" he immediately asked. As you can see, this group of domain creatures seems to have lost their minds. Be more reliable. Feng Qi couldn't help but roll his eyes. If I'm not wrong, this domain creature should be too weak. When they traveled through the dimensional tunnel, they couldn't withstand the dimensional countercurrent and were all turned into idiots by the countercurrent. Feng Qi was speechless. How dare this kind of trash invade? Besides, it's just for fun. At this time, he realized that not all of this humanoid domain creature had fallen into a blank state. Some of them were quickly running toward the sanctuary stone tablet. Although he didn't know why they were approaching the sanctuary stone tablet, he still decisively activated his blood origin ability. As his blood surged and enveloped his body, muscles began to rapidly grow. In the blink of an eye, Feng Qi became a humanoid monster more than 3 meters tall. His entire body was as sturdy as iron. Looking at the approaching humanoid domain creatures, he stood in front of the black stone tablet with a sinister smile and slowly clenched his fists. Regardless of their reason for approaching the sanctuary, he would kill them. Seeing Feng Qi standing outside the sanctuary's stone tablet, the approaching humanoid domain creatures' expressions changed, and they slowed down their footsteps. After dozens of domain creatures gathered, they gritted their teeth and decisively attacked Feng Qi. Facing the approaching humanoid domain creatures, Feng Qi clenched his fists and suddenly punched the head of the humanoid domain creature running at the front. It was like a rock colliding with an egg. This humanoid domain creature's head instantly exploded, and its body fell backward to the ground. Then, with a second punch, another humanoid domain creature fell to the ground. Their strength was far weaker than Feng Qi imagined. He finally understood why this group of domain creatures was almost wiped out when they just arrived. Their physical fitness was pitifully weak. They were only slightly better than an ordinary person 1,500 years ago. As he kept punching, all the humanoid domain creatures that dared to approach the sanctuary's stone tablet became ghosts under his punches. Facing Feng Qi's pressure, these humanoid domain creatures actually became timid and did not dare to approach him. They stood at a distance with a conflicted expression. It was as if there was something in the sanctuary that they desperately wanted to obtain. However, due to Feng Qi's pressure, they did not dare to risk their lives to approach. Seeing this scene, Feng Qi was also very curious about what these humanoid domain creatures wanted. He also realized that killing these humanoid domain creatures did not give him any innate abilities. It only gave him 3 bloodline evolution points. TSK, TSK, TSK. They are so weak that they don't even have any innate abilities. If the domain creatures that humans faced were all like this, victory would have come before you were born. Feng Qi was speechless. Just as he was about to reply, the narrator's surprised voice rang in his mind. "Hey, do you see that guy in the distance who is crippled and looking at you with a vigilant expression? Why do I feel that it looks a little familiar?" When Feng Qi heard this, he immediately looked into the distance. As he looked around, he suddenly noticed a humanoid domain creature with a crippled right leg standing in the distance. Its body was slanted, and its face was full of rune patterns. Right now, it was looking at him with vigilance. There was also a group of humanoid domain creatures surrounding it. It was obvious that its status in the domain creatures was not low. As he looked, Feng Qi suddenly thought of something and could not help but ask curiously, "Hey, could it be little ruins?" Chapter 190. FD Chapter. Support original version to start. Point Chinese Web. The contents of this chapter will be updated at 3:20. Can't eat it all, can't cover the mouth to be stubborn. When the door is delivered, suddenly the vegetable leak wave is big one. Lie down properly. The fog of the Lord is confusing me. The accident tragic vegetable leak light, confuses the Lord's fog. Jieshur people have just arrived. The group of clans excavation Jieshur one is in another. Want to have lofty aspiration to hold one's arms to see. At the end of the beginning, the Earth's Bone Berries by Ming Tar Rang. The picture fragment memory of the former death before the remnant small. The head can't be knotted by him. The words of the blank side listen. After the birth of the dead human clan, it and the remnant small are completely finished to see in the present. The life of the special to birth under the cage domain is the time when people live and die to return to me. The Earth's bone berries into the form of the method without foundation. The flesh and blood refinement of the internal magic, the magic power of the flesh and blood has been hammered into the enclosure. The middle source resources have been sent over by the transmission. Guan Yu Chio's round golden inner protection and suspicion. The style of the transmission in the direction of the transmission. Spreading out the group of clans to help the inner clan to send back the space across the source resources will be sent over by the special communication. When the source resources are rare to obtain in the possession of the object life domains Ming, when kind in hiding some of this period of time. The group of clans to the empty place of the transmission mark will often meet as usual. The group of clans that have been prepared to do so will be in the other period of time. The group of clans that have been created and spread out were given to the arrival of the Jieshur. The strongest and the strongest inner clan is them. The hundreds of human clans have come to choose. The heart is weak, the small is good. The middle clan's weak domains hidden inside to protect the city star. The sleeve collars clan's weak branch this remnant small. The root, the tens of thousands of dwellings are inside to protect the city star. After the human race's sacrifice is completely different. After the formation of the dead human clan, it and the remnant small are complete. The Earth's bone buries the upper realm before the dream. Life and death rise from the sky below. Afterwards, the blood and chi of the division of the great extinction, the dry absorption is followed by the later, the closing of the hidden internal body. The active stimulation is hollow in the air. The human races it, and the remnant small Tao pass through the space and go through the bitter hardship. The surface, drawing one to make up the brain, moves the self. The signal of sacrifice radiates the boundary to break off the outside. The closing of the flesh and blood, the opening of the battle has long been the fog of the Lord. The boundary comes to the human races it with the remnant small. The time when the Chongjingzhao between the hairline is indeed like the vegetable leak wave is one big cut. The master's fog is lost. The road is yellow. The whole clan is pushing the whole clan. Knowing that he is not in the hero's inner clan comes to send him off, hoping to embrace him. The tragedy is really small. Hiss. Jean sent over the drawing rules according to whether there was a book or not. After the ground clan's development, the group of clans, this is also the protection of the successful general. After the protection is completed, the movement starts to develop the group of clans domain. He within the protection alliance. The human race comes to send it. The waiting time comes to the human race's remnant small. Towards the Changzheng clan who walks the plan, this is the same. The sacrifice of the flesh and blood is the success. After the close of the flesh and blood, open the master's fog confusion will the group of clans have this place. The sacrifice of the flesh and blood, the brackets are also. The clear division of 10 changes is also at this time. It has always been at the gate. The remnant small's arrival will all be at the time of the dream to enter the first time. It is always right. The first event is determined to seal the chess. The model is familiar with it looking forward. Fall, crack, and shatter completely. The measure of strength is drained by the stone crystal rune's upper leg right it. The person's life and death is one to change the upper ground in the fall of the past soldier's battle domain, lame to look at him, eyes open. Break in the middle, abrupt surface painting, when a Rong inside the Xiang clan looks at the continuous preparation of the chess seal. Duan Jiejian's speed is high to enter, under the help of the human race far away in the clan. Accommodating the internal, magic, and blood chi matching the Xiang clan this, and can come send. The signal comes from the space to the battle of the soldiers, travel far away in the meeting, the period of time one passes the period of time this. Moving across the group of clans, why they all cut this. Kill, abandon, and throw away by the large number of inner clans, the rules of the elimination of the inferior to the superior, the stricter and stricter of the inner clans, the group of clans develops for the period of time this. Preparing to do the migration of the entire clan, not for the beginning of the opening, also for it. The choice is indeed the extreme. The worlds want to send the soldiers to fight the strongest inner clan. The clan's strength is exhausted. The initial understanding is also it. The starting of the clan seed to see is the body of the Gung, Shi, Zhan, Lame, Long clan. The gifts come to send the soldiers to fight far away. The gratitude, the joy of the clan's high. The limit of the growth of the height can be held. The technique of the flesh and blood body from Hammer Door. This refinement of the human race is only, clearly there is a message to send. The precious gifts are the most precious of the human race to lead the human race's world. This opening is the technique of the cultivation of the door. In the cultivation of magic and martial arts, the first thing to do is to bring along the surface, and the most important thing to do is to focus on it. The rare source resources were sent back to the human race's Jie, Shirgu, E. Going forward, there was the pillar of light, falling, the blood of the moon followed by the pillar of light, the color of the blood of the Tao. Once the matter is settled, I will give birth to the inner clan. Wait a minute, abandoned must be born later in the human race's trap. Heaven first, there's an internal race. Death, I choose the time to choose the price to create a group of clans for the law. There's no need to be generation 1 old internal race, as an example. The cool remnant of the rules of the first line, custom-made inner clan in the clan, the middle of the moon years old, come and go. The people of the world sent the strongest and most inner generals of the human race to the top of the 100. The formation of space is connected with the blood of the moon and the power of the Tao. The source of resources is completely accumulated, and the clan is weak and lacking in resources. The source of resources is here because of the original seed. How can we not know? The weak branch of the clan involved in the accident rose at Guanduan and gradually sealed the chess pieces. More and more picture fragments of memories of Zhonghai brain companion. The loss slowly dissipates in the pillar of light color blood, blessing of the human race's body with him, the strongest and most inner clan name of the 100. Casting down the hollow sky from the pillar of light color blood of the Tao, connecting the blood of the moon and the sky in the middle of the sky, time and activity are stimulated by the formation of the Tao. The formation of the complex of the one out of the swing, the source of resources of the 10 years, the accumulation of the inner clan's use of him, blessing of the people who sent it to the top of the line, the foresight of the people who came out to take the stone mine, the special use tattooed on the face of the soldier's name of the 100. In the second line of from the middle of the painting to look at him, turning to jump to the surface of the painting. The scorched earth of the scene in the past many have, the middle of the painting memory of the broken. Life is difficult. This in the clan plant one is still not. The evil is the extreme circle, the lack of resources in the scorched earth of the black piece of the one to look at him. The middle of the painting memory of some of this in the broken pieces of the broken pieces have only to be used, the match of the beauty finished, he and the faceless painting memory of some of this, together with the big brain of the self. In the middle of the brain, he is in the floating surface of the broken memory of the picture without pause. The state of dying to enter the body of the living domain, the leader of the lame leg, waiting in the middle, etc. In front of the shadow body's lame sluggishness has already shown the situation, burning in the body of the body. He came, puzzled with the suffering from the hidden sacrifice of flesh and blood. Also the inner body, it is difficult for it to. The sacrifice of the Lord's fog for the formation of the will, and the coming of the world from the domain is just showing the group of clan branches. The humanoid is only not combined. The force of the domain is marked to the Lord in the combination. To guess that the sutra has already pointed to one here, the sacrifice of the self for the formation of flesh and blood of the blood spirit is cut and received in order to be the main sacrifice of the flesh and blood of the Lord's fog. Puzzled and confused, the center of the reproach, he is here, close to it. He is about to see the chest seal. The right leg of the shadow body is broken. There is only one left, the support of the difficult fireworks in the only time of this. The ants are all cut into one in the middle of the eye. The living people look down, high above, the God of heaven and earth is like the Lord's fog. The cloud of blood is less or more, or drifts with the wind, also from all directions, time of this. And the strong change of the separated nurture it for success. The fog confusion color gray melts into the fog. The Lord's fog confusion drifts slowly to the cloud of blood in the sky. The sacrifice of the flesh and blood of the Lord's fog confusion for the Huadu spirit to have, except for the blink of an eye. The bones of the rest, the sky and sky to the blood, the flames in the flesh and blood, the flames in the green light burn, one by one the surface of the body connected. The Lord's fog confusion looks up. The dazed light looks the same as him. The shadow body is lucky to leave. The land is also the inner path of the metal protection. The cloud of blood surges and turns one into one in the sky and sky to the blood of the force of the transformation, the flames in the flesh and blood of the body. The flames burn, one by one, the surface of the body of the living domain. The eyes of the light believe in the difficult chest seal. Sacrifice. The Lord's fog confusion of the sky and the sky to the direction of the body, one by one it. The sluggish change gradually follows the situation. The ground is original in the moment of pause. It is not the human race. It and the leader of the living domain are lame together. In the moment of restriction, it seems like the world, the roaring lord's fog confusion companion. Sacrifice. The floating fog gray in the eyes of the red scarlet too, the shadow body gas fog figure on the upper half of the body of the big man, only to become illusory, gradually chasing the column of fog gray. The column of fog gray looked straight at him, the groove spitting out the white light turned into nothing. Oh, go flying weapon marshal, you look quickly. Seeing that the clouds do not lose the fragmentary layer, in the blink of an eye, Gao Sheng did not break down the column of ash rushing down. The small, delicate plate of the shadow body sucked to the ground far away. The column of ash Guan Zhuang Dao has taken shape, rising to the sky. The mist color gray is dense. The sound of a loud noise came from the west. The fist tiger of the hand raised fiercely, waving his hand to reach out to him. The leader of the living domain limped closer and gradually looked. After seeing enough, or else the manifestation of Feng Dozhan's form was reckless. The hand in front of him was higher than his strength, the same phase of strength in the strength. The hand against death, the dominant force against absolute power, the violent, simple style of Feng Dozhan. The crushing of the hand in front of him was completely measured by his strength. The foot of the face, square, skillful technique Dozhan, was from himself. He found him, at the same time, helpless feeling. The hand is not to show him the state of origin blood. There is no time for this. He stood up to break the fruit. The leader of the living domain came to walk slowly from afar, tilting his body to look at him. The state of origin blood went to him. The state of origin blood went to him. The state of origin blood fell to the ground. The scattered wind followed the surface of the flesh and blood, at the same time flying down his body. Oh, the premise of the work, the anger of the old board. Out of the flying swing, he fiercely pulled back, flipped over in the middle of the air, and borrowed the strength of the living domain, the leader of the living domain, lame, when this can be, smashing down again. His legs lifted up fiercely, and his breath took a deep breath. Losing the advantage of the situation, the disguise is not good. Afraid of strangers, the lame leg hugs the chest seal tightly. The play has to be watched. The pain of the situation came out, suddenly on the face, on the ground, the territory behind the solid knot, the lame leg, trembling face. Boom! Falling down and hugging the record one fiercely. The lame leg holds the broken fruit, the heavy hit by the chest to endure him, the oncoming attack face to face again when the leg is lame. With the red-eye chest seal, the white side of the wake up to listen. The ground is tripping. He will be able to total when the leg is hooked when the small change of the right leg can be especially. The strong is the extreme, the skillful technique Dozhan. The strong is still a little stronger. The weak is compared to the right leg of the living domain, the leader of the living domain, the lame leg. The grievance is divided into 10 to feel the chest seal order, the coming and going of the battle. The leader of the living domain, the lame leg, pounced again, jumped up to flip him, and slapped one on the ground fiercely with both hands. Damn! The moon, blood hazy, appeared floating time, and looking at the center line, the ground fell heavily behind, and when leaning back, the body of the big, 3 meters tall, unprepared, the leg hooked down one on the opposite side. If the heart is not stable, the weight will be lost, the sudden pressure, the head is in the middle of the concentration of the chest seal. He squatted down, the leader of the living domain, the leg of the living domain, the lame leg, the small, shrinking, suddenly lame leg. The border is open to push the lame leg will be angry. The drum one can be prepared for him. Lifting the leg, the lame general points one. The strength of the body condenses him, roaring angrily accompanied by. Dozhan continues to fight with all the strength, to choose only his hand. The enemy's strength is not opposite. Can be endless, cowardly admit. The light is fierce, the chest seal, the analysis of the white side listen. The hand is right. It is certain that you will not say that I will do. The enemy of the warrior battle is strong domain and can be many, but the human is general is the division of the big absolute. The clan is like the righteous. The strong will also be willing to be in the human race. The weak domain is the use of the strong good. If he does not move his order, the mountain great master presses down as if the top of his head can feel. Shun Yi's body is sealed. The attack power is huge. Boom! Crossing the top of his arms, he raised the broken fruit, the sound of the wind breaking to hear. The thick domi with big legs blinked. The wind rose to meet the hollow on the right leg. Smashing the head down, when he goes to the right leg, the leader of the living domain comes up with a lame leg, standing steadily. He cannot return. Standing up, the broken fruit is stunned and wrong, temporarily short chest seal. The moon's blood in the sky looks up. The ground falls heavily. The sky faces backward, half of the big flowing out by the strength of the upper fist when the body is slanted. The defense is not sudden. He orders all the upper force and speed in the next one. Go. Ely uses the left leg. He goes to the right leg of the stone crystal rune inlay to extend, squatting suddenly the living domain leader's lame leg in the boundary. He who is about to hit the fist can be. Smashing the head of the living domain leader's lame leg toward the ground. Face covering. The power of the mountain open is more fist iron. The feeling of pressure is full. The mountain's small seat one is like a chest seal in front of the living domain leader's lame leg, close to the eye of the blinking me, you sure. The strength can be endowed with heaven one to obtain the ability to kill. The stone crystal rune has the upper body. It is attacking into the starting point of the living domain leader's lame leg toward the movement of the main chest seal. The eyes rolled. You dry hand out. I blame rest is not. The road let catch up with the grandfather's lame leg you give this guy that face. The next translation you give me. 2 roars. The heavy concentration of feelings. The chest seal looks. The 2 steps forward. This is when it. Side body it to retreat one after another. The human race Yu Chi pauses, calling the monster to set off this time. The living domain leader's lame leg. The chest seal is not able to help the root of the human race's own to see. When the living domain leader's piece one is smashed down, the force of the impact of the strong. The punch is followed by the left fist, followed by the chi choking field. When the domain leader of the matter life domain is only here, the cracking of the skull accompanied by the sound, smashing the fist upside down. The domain leader of the matter life domain comes to meet him head on. The fist is like a chess piece, the upper arm bulging with blue veins. Come to pounce the chess seal, chi, e, the living domain leader's body. It's suddenly. When the living domain leader's leg is lame, the tablet stone protects the eye to see. It is not a complete human race chicken weak, and the stone crystal rune purple one is inlaid unexpectedly. The living domain leader's leg on the right side of the upper leg is lame to see him this. When he looks light, he pauses him, wake him to carry the white side to listen. The hand is right. It is determined not to return to you, full of blood and chi in the body of the fellow. The enemy underestimates. The fist of iron, it asks first to be protected by the shelter and a thinking, how about nothing? The fist of the head clenches tightly, and when the chest seal comes close to him, he faces the vigilant face one. This living domain leader's leg appears lame. How did the matter come back to this? So, close to each other, the small and small body. He feels all see how to seal the chest seal. The living domain leader's leg is lame. Looking, the front line of the class is me. It will definitely not be able to do it. Tie up the time to continue the state of the origin blood you. On next one idea note. When a stalemate enters the trap, one battle. The living domain leader's leg is lame. What can he do? The strong defensive force can recover him. He does not break. The living domain leader's leg is lame, in the battle to come and go. Break free by the second one to the living domain leader's leg is lame. Bind only the strength of the mind. Raise the level of the strong body flesh. He is not far away from the strength of the spirit that has been raised. The living domain leader's leg is lame. Grab the strength of the mind to use the map to try. The outer body penetrates when the strength of the mind to use the mind. The fire of the heart chest seal. The suppression is completely completed by the skill of fighting in the battle. Come to look at the hole in his eyes. Stand up from the ground, slowly from the remnant small. Come to transmit the sound roar low one, when this is chest seal. Chapter 191. Looking at Little Can have been turned into a living dead. Feng Qi felt no pity at all, even though he knew that Little Can did all this for the sake of its race. But it shouldn't have built its race's rise on the invasion and destruction of human civilization. Even if the Lord of Mist didn't accidentally harvest Little Can and its people, the human survivors in the shelter would still face the crisis of internal and external threats. They might even be brutally killed by Little Can and its people. Split. As the narrator shouted, Little Can, who had just stood up, did a split on the spot. Without the rune crystal, Little Can's innate deformity made it unable to stand normally. Feng Qi then took a step forward and crushed Little Can's head with his foot. As he expected, he didn't get Little Can's talent ability after killing it. He also thought of the reason. He could indeed extract talent ability from killing domain creatures. But now, Little Can had become the Lord of Mist's sacrifice. It was just a new life that had been transformed from a corpse without any consciousness. Naturally, he couldn't extract talent ability from a dead creature. As for Little Can's origin, it was very clear now. But Little Can wasn't a threat to him at all. Compared to the Lord of Mist who had planned for thousands of years and possessed great power. Whether it was Little Can's combat power or future plans, it was very childish and laughable. The end result was also very tragic. It originally thought that by bringing its people through space to the human world, it could lead its race to rise in a better future. But it didn't expect that the hundreds of years of hard work would be exchanged for the extinction of its race. And it was completely wiped out in an extremely ridiculous way, becoming the nutrients for the Lord of Mist's growth. At this moment, looking at the human survivors who had also become zombies, Feng Qi felt very uncomfortable. But he didn't feel too emotional and quickly adjusted his mentality. He also looked forward to a future timeline where the people of the future would work together with him to dispel the domain invasion and walk towards victory. This was just a process, not the end. The past is just a prelude. Abai, you know me best. A father knows a son best. With our relationship, no one knows you better than I do. Ba go by. Ignoring the narrator's retort, he looked up at the sky. At this moment, the Lord of Confusion Fog had used the fog to condense into a human upper body. He opened his arms and absorbed the vitality energy that was continuously surging in from all directions. The gray fog was also growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. This time, Murakami did not come. He subconsciously turned his head to the east. The last time they came into contact with the future, Murakami wanted to kill the Lord of Mist. However, due to some special situation in the east, Murakami did not have the heart to continue fighting and chose to leave first. Before he left, he even told the Lord of Fog that he would come back and kill it. At this moment, in the eastern sky, there were faintly discernible stars twinkling with resplendent light. They were connected to each other, as if something had happened. As for what Murakami was about to face, he had a rough idea. The domain came from all directions and was about to devour the entire world. The plains at the end of the city ruins were the last piece of land. At that time, Murakami would also become a statue along with the fall of that land and die with the entire world. In fact, until now, he still did not understand what the Black Shadow meant by the coming of the general trend. At first, he thought that the coming of the general trend was the domain devouring the entire world, but now it seemed that this was not the case. He guessed that the general trend should be something that happened after the domain devoured the world. The various domain forces also seemed to be preparing for the arrival of that day. The Lord of Confusion Fog's 1,000-year plan was to harvest the vitality of humans and the weak races in the domain to strengthen himself. The Black Shadow race occupied the technology research facility and provided materials and resources in an attempt to create the superweapon Xiaohe. Their plan seemed to be preparing for the coming of the general trend. However, he obviously could not see the scene of the coming of the general trend in this future dreamland line. He turned his head to look at the Lord of Confusion Fog in the sky, and the Lord of Confusion Fog also looked at him. The huge gray fog body slowly pressed down and came to the top of shelter above Feng Chi's head. Looking at Feng Chi, a mocking smile appeared on the face formed by the fog. Agi, its expression seems to be mocking you. Obviously, it thinks you've lost, and it has won. Although I'm not its opponent now, I can't lose in a verbal battle. Before I'm killed, I'll greet its ancestors, starting with its mother. Ready, fire. Feng Chi was speechless. Looking at the Lord of Confusion Fog, he asked with a calm expression, Lin Ran lost? No wonder my strength grew so slowly. It turns out that Lin Ran hasn't died. Instead, he's living in my mind and constantly devouring my power. But now his consciousness has completely disappeared. I've won. But now I'm curious. When you explained to Lin Ran just now, you said that you can travel between reality and the future. Is that true or false? I've never heard of such an ability. Maybe even the Pillar God doesn't have such an ability. Faced with this question, Feng Chi decided to try his best to get some useful information from the Lord of Confusion Fog before he died. Thinking of this, he looked at the Lord of Confusion Fog and asked, Tell me first, what are the Pillar Gods? A group of founders of the old order. Tell me more details. I don't understand, he quickly asked. I don't know much about them either, but I know that I'll become one of the founders of the new order in the future, the new Pillar God. It's your turn. Tell me about your situation. What secrets do you have, and how did you know that I would possess Lin Ran? Wait, I still have a question. What happened in the East? Upon hearing this, the Lord of Confusion Fog turned to look at the few connected stars in the East. A hint of surprise appeared in its eyes. You seem to know a lot. So, what's in the eastern sky? I can feel that you seem to be eager to get information from me. I can indeed give you a lot of information that I know, but you can't provide me with any useful information. Now, I don't want to waste any more time. Looking at the Lord of Confusion Fog's sarcastic smile, Feng Chi saw the murderous intent in its eyes. Therefore, he decisively raised his middle finger at it. After lurking in human society for so many years, you can understand this gesture, right? If not, I can explain it to you. The struggle of a loser. As soon as it finished speaking, the giant palm formed by the fog moved above Feng Chi's head. Just as it was about to slap down, the Lord of Confusion Fog suddenly turned to look at the northern sky. Seeing this, Feng Chi followed the Lord of Confusion Fog's gaze. In the northern sky, a cloud of black fog was quickly drifting over. Seeing this cloud of black fog, the Lord of Confusion Fog's face showed a serious expression. Feng Chi's expression also darkened. He originally thought that this future dreamscape Science and Technology Research Institute had been completely destroyed. Even if Xiao He was still created in the future, it might not pursue him due to the changes in history. However, this was obviously not the case. The most important thing is that no matter how history changes, Xiao He, this bastard, is still determined to kill you. No matter when or where he is, he will cross thousands of mountains and rivers to come to you. This is the kind of unwavering murderous intent. After hearing the narration, he could not help but sigh in his heart. No matter how he thought about it, he could not understand why Blackie wanted to kill him. Whether it was fighting against the Science and Technology Research Institute, joining the Science and Technology Research Institute, or not contacting the Science and Technology Research Institute, Xiao He had never stopped pursuing him. It was like a tracking missile 1,500 years in the future, always accurately finding him and then taking his life. This was completely illogical in his opinion. Whether it was in reality or in any future line, he had never been in contact with Xiao He. The domain force behind the Science and Technology Research Institute obviously did not create Xiao He to deal with him. Why was Xiao He targeting him? Thinking of this, he suddenly had an idea in his mind. He could not help but ask in his heart, Bai, this bastard is not coming for you, right? I'm a scapegoat now. Now I'm in a state of near nothingness. Even my own senses can't sense my existence. Why would Xiao He target me? It must be your own problem. What problem can I have? You can live normally without any flesh on your body, and you say you have no problem? He looked down at his fleshless body, and a touch of awkwardness appeared on his face. Looking up to the north, Xiao He was quickly approaching him. The black fog body spread into a sea of black fog and pressed down on him. At this time, the Lord of Mist obviously did not know that Xiao He's target was not him, but Feng Qi. In the face of Xiao He's attack, he decisively chose to fight back. As the gray fog rolled, it carried the ferocious spirits and shrouded Xiao He. Seeing this, Feng Qi could not help but smile. The Lord of Mist was indeed powerful. However, it was obviously not enough in front of Xiao He, who could completely suppress it. The Lord of Mist had fought with Xiao He in the previous few future dreamlines. In the end, it was defeated every time. Even though the Lord of Mist had devoured a large amount of vitality, it was not enough in front of Xiao He. Just as he expected, the moment the gray fog and the black fog came into contact, the gray fog shrunk at a speed visible to the naked eye. The area that came into contact with the black fog was quickly devoured. Seeing this, the Lord of Mist showed a surprised expression on its face. However, it did not choose to compromise with Xiao He. Instead, it shrunk its body and consolidated its gray fog body. Once again, it pressed down on Xiao He. In an instant, a strong wind swept across. The surging power triggered the power of heaven and earth. Dense black cracks appeared wherever the gray fog palm passed. The space was torn and healed. This showed the power of the palm. However, the seemingly invincible attack did not have any effect in front of Xiao He. All the energy waves that came into contact with the spiritual nanoworms, including the shock waves, were devoured by Xiao He. It did not even move back an inch. Agi, how about we make a bet? What are we betting on? I bet that the Lord of Mist can't defeat Xiao He. You bet that the Lord of Mist can defeat Xiao He. The bet is that you'll call me Daddy. How about that? Stupid system. Upon hearing this, Feng Qi could not help but roll his eyes. There were many creatures that could fight Xiao He, but he had never encountered a creature that could defeat Xiao He. This was especially true for the Lord of Mist, whose energy form was completely restrained. It was like a buffet in front of Xiao He. Just as it expected, the Lord of Mist was shocked when it realized that its energy was being devoured continuously while it could not do any harm to Xiao He. Realizing that Xiao He had the terrifying ability to devour energy, the mist no longer poured energy at Xiao He. Instead, it quickly condensed. In the end, the Lord of Mist changed its form. When the gray mist dispersed, a demonic young man with purple hair and purple pupils stood not far away from Feng Qi. He looked almost exactly the same as Lin Ran in the past, but there was an additional hint of evilness. He looked at Xiao He with a serious expression and reached out to grab Xiao He. Suddenly, cracks appeared in the space around Xiao He. It was trying to trap Xiao He in the space cage. Sure enough, this move was effective. The spiritual nanoworms could not fly out of the space cage through the cracks in space. Upon seeing this, Feng Qi could not help but ask, "What's this?" Narrator, is it possible to use the sealing method to deal with Little Black? For example, we can learn a sealing technique in the future and find a place to suppress Xiao He for 10,000 years. Seals are also formed by energy. However, the sealing technique performed by the Lord of Mist this time is more special. It severed a space and then sealed Xiao He in this space. The spiritual nanoworms are very small and can't fly out at all. However, it might not be effective against Xiao He. As soon as the narrator finished speaking, Xiao He suddenly turned into a black solid form in the space cage surrounded by the black cracks in space. While he was surprised, Xiao He extended his hand out of the cracks in space. The black cracks in space instantly tore his palm apart. This scene was like the photo being torn apart, and the person in the photo was also torn apart. However, the part of Xiao He's body that was torn apart left the space cage and turned back into black mist. Following that, Xiao He's physical body kept coming into contact with the cracks in space and chose to self-sever. He tore his entire body into pieces and left the space cage. However, his body was not harmed at all. After leaving the space cage, he turned back into black mist and pressed down on the Lord of Mist. Right at this moment, another figure sped over from afar. The ground shook from the movement of the figure as he ran. Feng Qi turned his head and looked. He noticed that to the west, there was a long trail of smoke and dust that stretched for several miles, rapidly approaching his location. Upon closer inspection, he could see that at the front of the smoke and dust was a suction cup that was moving its limbs frantically and crawling close to the ground. Good heavens, your weapon has returned automatically. Just as Xiaohe shrouded the Lord of Mist, the suction cup arrived as well. It leaped up and threw a punch at Xiaohe and the Lord of Mist, who were entangled together. The jade-colored flowing light turned into a huge fish shadow in the air and smashed down. The ground shook violently. The black mist on Xiaohe's body was instantly dispersed. The Lord of Mist was also struck deep into the ground by this punch. When the smoke and dust dispersed, the Lord of Mist floated out of the deep pit in a sorry state and hovered in the air. Although he was not injured, he did not look too good when he saw the suction cup return. At this moment, the suction cup disappeared in a flash in the air and suddenly appeared behind the Lord of Mist. It swung its small fist down. The Lord of Mist seemed to have predicted this and instantly disappeared from where he was. The suction cup's punch landed on Xiaohe, who happened to be charging at him. Seeing the three-way battle, Feng Qi could not help but grin. It seemed like a good idea to watch a great battle before he died. However, at this moment, the Lord of Mist suddenly turned to look at him. Is it nice to watch? As soon as he finished speaking, the palm formed by the gray mist slammed down on him. F***CKU, before he could curse. The world in his eyes was covered in gray. Then it turned black. When the gray mist dissipated, the area where Feng Qi stood had a huge palm print. Meanwhile, Feng Qi had been crushed to dust. After Feng Qi died, the starry sky in the suction cup's eyes turned scarlet. It pounced on the Lord of Mist. Xiaohe quietly arrived at the spot where Feng Qi had been crushed to dust. The black mist enveloped him. Chapter 192. When he opened his eyes, he saw the ceiling of the dorm. Slowly sitting up from the sofa, Feng Qi looked at the empty wine bottle and rubbed his dizzy head. The overlapping of memories was still there, but most of the memories had become clear. He stood up and sat in front of the desk, then opened his notebook. He started to organize the information he got from the future dream. This time, there was no increase in strength in the future dream, so he skipped the recording of his strength and started to organize the information. There was a lot of information, so he thought for a while before starting to write. First, I confirmed that there are some trustworthy peers in the Future Research Institute, such as Li Xingqian and Jia Hui, but not all of them are trustworthy. Some of them are still under the control of the Research Institute. Note, you can work with Li Xingqian and Jia Hui in the future, depending on the situation. Second, fighting against the Research Institute can change the future greatly, allowing me to interact with people from the future to obtain more useful information and access to the future database. Note, the opportunity to change the future doesn't lie in the Breaking Dawn organization, but when the Breaking Dawn organization is influential, we can call on those who are willing to stand up and fight against the Research Institute. First, there is a hidden domain weak race in the future Star City Sanctuary. Second, there is a golden ball in the future Star City Sanctuary that provides the operation of the sanctuary and releases space signals. Third, there is a large amount of resources in the future sanctuary that can help the suckers recover their strength. Guess, this golden ball might be the connection node between Shao Kahn and the people hiding in the sanctuary. As for where the golden ball came from, I don't know for now. Third, from the current information, the Lord of Mist promotion of flesh sacrifice and planted hidden dangers is not only targeting humans, but also other domain forces hiding in the human civilization. Note, solving the flesh sacrifice is equivalent to helping other domain weak races hiding in the human civilization. Maybe we can consider a timeline to unite with other domain weak races to fight against the Tiger Soul Institute, which is the Lord of Mist. Fourth, Xiao Can's origin is clear, but the current information still can't explain why Shao Kahn and its people took such a huge risk to come to the human world, instead of choosing to live in the domain world they are in. Guess 1. Shao Kahn has a huge ambition and wants its race to rise. Conjecture 2. Shao Kahn, for some reason, knew that there would be a huge threat to its race's survival in the future. Perhaps it was the arrival of the general trend, so it chose to fight with its life on the line. That was why it spent all of its race's resources to build a space tunnel and came to the human world. Intelligence Gain 5. The Scarlet Institute's rune modification plan can help future timelines without innate abilities to strengthen their bodies. As long as they can endure the pain during the modification process, they can increase their compatibility with a rune crystal. Note: in the future, you can ask the Scarlet Institute to prepare more rune crystals that are compatible with me. Intelligence Gain 6. From the follow-up information sent by the Scarlet Institute, we know that the Prajna Domain Battle Group behind the Monk and the Victory Battle Group under the Victory Research Institute are all forces that are secretly planning to save the world. Note: you can try to make contact with these forces in the future and learn more useful information from them. Intelligence Gain 7. This future line gave him more information. He sorted out more than 10 lines before he stopped writing. At this moment, the negative effects of the overlapping memories had lessened a lot. He also remembered a lot of important information he learned in the Scarlet Institute. For example, knowledge implantation technology. This technology allowed him to directly implant this information into the brain of his future self without having to memorize the super virtual game code in the database. Then, he could use the nightmare ability to read his future self's brain and directly obtain this information. However, this technology wasn't without its shortcomings. The amount of stored knowledge was a problem that Vivian and the researchers of the Scarlet Institute couldn't solve. Originally, he sacrificed himself and gave the Scarlet Institute research information on psionic technology, hoping that the Scarlet Institute would pass it to him. However, the implantation of the super virtual game code had already exhausted the Scarlet Institute's energy. If they wanted to implant more information on psionic technology, they obviously didn't have the energy and resources to continue. Therefore, there was another problem that he urgently needed to solve: how to improve the strength of the Scarlet Institute and pave the way for him in the future. The problem of resources and manpower. If the Scarlet Institute wanted to have a place in the future, its current strength wasn't enough. This problem is simple. The Science and Technology Research Institute is backed by the Dark Shadow. The Tiger Soul Institute is backed by the Lord of the Mist, and the Scarlet Institute is backed by, of course, it's me. Feng Qi was speechless. He did want to help the Scarlet Institute develop. In addition to providing technical support, he had also thought about how to help the Scarlet Institute obtain more resources. At this moment, he already had all the code for the super virtual game in his mind. In other words, he could build the super virtual game in the real world in advance. In addition to promoting the development of human civilization, this project could also earn a lot of money for the Scarlet Institute to buy and collect a lot of resources. In addition, virtual reality simulation experiments could also save the Scarlet Institute unnecessary waste on research projects. As for the risks, he didn't have to worry too much about this. He had communicated with the Dark Shadow before. At that time, the Dark Shadow mistakenly thought that he was a representative of a certain domain and infiltrated human society to set up the future. It also said that as long as he didn't interfere with them, they wouldn't stop him. From this, Feng Qi also learned one more thing. The various domain forces didn't want to take the initiative to expose themselves. As long as they weren't offended, they wouldn't take the initiative to attack other domain forces, unless they clearly knew the other party's background and had something to gain, including the Tiger Soul Institute. But the premise was that the other party wasn't a human force. Now, he could use the name of a domain force to create this virtual game. Time quickly passed by while he was thinking. After a while, his phone rang. He picked up the phone on the desk and saw that it was Lin Ran calling. The Lord of the Mist is calling. He wants to tell you that the future is waiting for you. Let's arm wrestle. Feng Qi was speechless. He looked at the time. It was already 5:32. He didn't need to think to know what Lin Ran wanted to say. After he picked up the phone, Lin Ran's voice came from the other end. Brother Qi, what are you thinking about? Why aren't you here yet? Is there something wrong with your mind? I'm coming. After hanging up the phone, Feng Qi stood up and left the dormitory. When he walked out of the dormitory building, The sun was setting and the sky was red. He walked quickly along the boulevard that led to Shuefa restaurant. After walking for more than 10 minutes, he suddenly saw a familiar figure walking out of the restaurant with a smile on his face. His walking posture was slightly arrogant. As he swayed, his shiny head was covered with a layer of hazy halo under the setting sun. He gave off the aura of a local ruffian. When he thought about how the monk had smiled and said to him, "You didn't ask," at the sacrifice line, he immediately took 2 steps forward and blocked the monk's path. "Brother Chi, are you going to eat?" Realizing that it was Feng Chi who was blocking his way, the monk immediately smiled and greeted him. "Monk, you've hidden it well," replied Feng Chi with a smile. "Brother Chi, what do you mean? Why don't I understand?" The monk scratched his bald head in confusion. "Are you free tonight? Come to my dormitory. I have something to talk to you about." "Unfortunately, I just applied to go back to the temple. I just finished my dinner, and I was about to go back to change into my ascetic clothes before leaving the school." The monk scratched his head in embarrassment. "All right then, I'll talk to you next time. I'll go to the restaurant first." Feng Chi smiled and patted the monk's shoulder. Seeing that Feng Chi was about to leave, the monk suddenly asked again, "Brother Chi, you've hidden it well." "Brother Chi, what do you mean by that? You seem to be hiding a lot." Looking at the monk's honest expression, Feng Chi naturally knew that the monk was testing him on purpose. He wanted to know if he really knew some secrets. He did not intend to expose him directly. He planned to have a good chat with the monk when he was free. Then, he would find out more useful information from the monk. Therefore, he smiled and replied, "It's fine. You can go do what you need to do." After saying that, he walked straight to Shuefu restaurant, leaving the monk standing there in confusion with a complicated expression. It was already past 6 when he arrived at Shuefu restaurant. At this time, there were still students arriving at the restaurant. The buffet that was added regularly was still sumptuous. He took a tray and spent about 5 minutes selecting a full tray of food. Then, he went to the north corner of the restaurant. At this time, Lin Ran was almost done eating. Only Mu Qing was still eating. He came to Lin Ran's side, put down the tray, and sat down sideways. "Brother Chi, what took you so long? What are you busy with?" Lin Ran asked curiously. "Saving the world. I'm a little busy. Count me in." Lin Ran immediately replied with a smile, thinking that Feng Chi was joking. "No problem. I'll call you next time. You have to work harder." Looking at the confused Lin Ran, he looked at Mu Qing. As if noticing his gaze, Mu Qing raised her head. She was still chewing on her food with her bulging mouth. This scene reminded him of a sucker. TSK, 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 as expected of a sucker. Even the expression when eating is the same. The narrator also exclaimed, "Aji, what's the matter?" Mu Qing asked curiously. "Nothing, eat your food." As he spoke, he grabbed a golden fried pork chop and took a bite. The rich flavor of cheese and meat juices overflowed in his mouth. He was enjoying it. In the memory of the sacrifice line, he always appeared in the middle of the night. It had been a long time since he had a decent meal. He also deeply felt that happiness was measured by comparison. Just like how a person with 4 limbs complained about the trivial things in life, but after being paralyzed, he missed the days when he could walk freely. But after he got bed sores, he missed the days when he could sit in a wheelchair. Every stage of happiness was always measured by a worse situation. Modern people complained about the invasion of the territory, which led to the possibility of being attacked by creatures that surpassed the territory even in the city. However, they didn't know that people in the future always lived underground, and newborn children never saw real sunlight. The sun was only a golden ball in videos and pictures, but they never felt its warmth and brightness. Now that he was eating delicious food, he felt a sense of happiness. He ate for a long time. During that time, he wanted to get more food before he stopped, satisfied. After dinner, he said goodbye to Mu Qing and went to the library with Lin Ran. The library was brightly lit at night. It was the place with the most students in Star City University at this time of the year. After choosing a book, he went to the reading room and sat down. At this time, Feng Chi pushed the book in his hand in front of Lin Ran. "Read this today. If there's anything you don't understand, ask me." Elementary mental deconstruction? Why am I looking at this? Lin Chi was dumbfounded. I want to develop a technique to increase the strength of one's mind. I also need to pair it with a top-level mind attack technique. I know about techniques, but I don't know about spells, so I need your help." Feng Qi smiled. Hearing that he wanted to develop a new technique, Lin Ran was instantly energized. "No problem. Brother Qi, tell me about the technique you're going to develop. What's the situation?" Faced with the question, Feng Qi immediately told him about a part of the 5-star technique Boundless that he memorized in the future dream. Since he wanted to bait Lin Ran, he naturally had to give him something substantial. Boundless was a technique that leaned towards spiritual cultivation, so the content was naturally very good bait. Hearing his description, Lin Ran's interest was piqued. Then he patted his chest and promised, "Brother Qi, leave the difficult task of mental attack technique to me. I'll definitely develop a spell that's worthy of your technique. But I don't know much about spiritual-oriented spells. Let me calm down and think about it for a while. Wait for my good news." "No problem. I'll wait for your good news in the future, Aran." Hearing the narrator's sarcasm, a smile appeared on Feng Qi's face. At this time, Lin Ran picked up the book he had chosen. With a serious expression, he entered into study mode. Seeing how motivated Lin Ran was, he couldn't help but nod in his heart. A single person's path to salvation was too lonely. He longed for many companions to walk side by side with. Lin Ran had outstanding talent. If he could become his right-hand man in the future dream, there would definitely be fewer obstacles ahead. In the dead of the night, the number of people in the reading room didn't decrease. Instead, it gradually increased. Looking at the students beside him who were immersed in their studies, Feng Qi felt gratified. The students here were like him, learning history from a young age. Therefore, they also knew that the stability of Star City today was exchanged for by the sacrifices of the martyrs. If it weren't for these martyrs, human civilization would have been destroyed 500 years ago. The predecessors planted the trees, and the descendants enjoyed the shade. In this era where danger lurked everywhere, the trees were built from the monuments of the martyrs. Feng Qi saw a promising future from the students' hard-working looks. Throughout history, there would be historical sinners who were spurned by people in every era. However, there were also people who refused to give in and still believe in the light. They used their blood to light a bonfire in the dark night, wanting to fight for a future for humanity. If you asked them why they were working so hard, they would use history to tell their descendants. They would work hard for you, work hard for the future, and work hard for the human race to usher in a brilliant era. They knew that they couldn't see the future. They only wanted to shine in their era. He listened to the sound of paper and pen rubbing against each other. Feng Qi felt that they, who were placed high hopes in this era, seemed to want to use their own methods to write history that would be remembered by their descendants. They fought for a beautiful future that they would build for their descendants. The predecessors planted the trees, and the descendants enjoyed the shade. It was the same in every era. It was the same in every era. There would always be people who didn't give up. Chapter 193. Over the next few days, Feng Qi didn't choose to enter the future dream. The memory overlapping effect hadn't disappeared yet, so he needed a few days to digest it. For the past few days, he had been busy learning about battle group configuration and teaching about cultivation. As for the 5-star rated boundless cultivation method, he didn't plan to teach it all at once. He decided to start teaching from the foundation. He wanted to give the outside world a chance to study and improve the method. As for the virtual game, he had already planned it out. After entering Star City University, Feng Zhio had already created the future virtual engine. The main problem was to improve the virtual engine. This was what Feng Zhio had been working on. 3 days later, at the Scarlet Institute, the taxi slowly stopped outside of the metal wall of the Scarlet Institute. After getting out of the car, Feng Qi looked at Vivian, who was standing at the gate of the base with a smile on his face. Since he had confirmed that the Scarlet Institute was completely trustworthy, he decided to cooperate with the Scarlet Institute in the real world, especially in the creation of virtual games. "What are you laughing at? Are we familiar with each other?" Wei Wei said with a speechless expression as she walked up to him. "Coming here is like coming home." Hearing this, Wei Wei was stunned. Were you a specimen in our laboratory in your previous life? Did you come back to find the remains of your previous life? Let's talk inside the base. It's not convenient to talk outside. As Feng Qi spoke, he walked into the wall. Vivian saw this and immediately followed. They came to the gate of the base, went through the identity verification, and walked into the base. Along the way, Vivian had a lot of doubts. She realized that Feng Qi was very familiar with this place. It didn't seem like it was his first time here. He even knew which checkpoint required identity verification. After walking for a while, Vivian couldn't help but ask, "Why do I feel like you know the situation of the Scarlet Base so well? Have you really been here before?" "Not only have I been here, but I've also lived here for a few months." Feng Qi grinned. "You seem to have a lot of secrets." Vivian was curious. "Yes, I'm here to confess my secret to you. Weren't you going to talk to me about the creation of the virtual reality game? There's a more important confession before that." As they chatted, Vivian brought him to the reception room. Without hesitation, he told his secret to Vivian in detail. Listening to his story, Vivian's expression changed from indifferent to serious. Wei Wei finally understood why Feng Qi said that returning to the Scarlet Base was like returning home when she learned that they had traveled together to save the world in several future lines. Because in the previous timeline, this place also treated Feng Qi as a family member. After understanding the reason, Vivian asked him to wait for a while and then left the reception room. A moment later, Vivian returned and brought him to the Scarlet Supreme conference room. The process was the same as in his memory. Before entering the Scarlet Supreme Council, he went through a series of physical examinations and changed his clothes. After passing all the examinations, he came to the Supreme conference room. He sat down next to Vivian, went straight to the point, and recounted his experience. Compared to the previous future timeline, this time there was more information about the previous timeline. After listening to his story, the Scarlet Base executives sitting at the conference table were silent for a long time before they came back to their senses. The amount of information was too much for them to digest. From this information, they understood that Feng Qi was not joking. He had really experienced it himself. While they were shocked by the information, the way they looked at Feng Qi changed. They could not imagine that this young man would struggle in despair again and again, overcome his cowardice and confusion, and still firmly chose to stand on the side of humans and shed his blood for the sake of saving the world. Feng Qi, it's the fortune of humans to have you. The Scarlet President with a head full of white hair stood up at this time. His eyes were sincere and then bowed to him. The other executives also stood up at this time. President, it's the fortune of humans to have people like you. Feng Qi also stood up at this time and bowed to the Scarlet Base executives. The Scarlet Research Institute's contribution in every timeline was of great significance. From the initial intelligence investigation, the talent blind box, to the current memory implantation technology, every Scarlet person walked on the path of saving the world silently and firmly. Even if they ate nutrition cream every day, they had to leave resources for important research and development. This was especially true for Wei Wei. As a foodie, she was willing to spend hundreds of years on a single research project. Each of their contributions were worthy of recognition. If it weren't for these colleagues of the Scarlet Institute standing behind him and clearing a lot of obstacles for him, his progress would have been bumpy and he would have fallen heavily from time to time. He was always grateful for this comradeship. In the following time, he and the Scarlet Institute discussed the idea of building an all-round research institute and the development of a super virtual game. Feng Qi's idea was very simple. Let the Scarlet Institute participate in the research and development of the super virtual game, and then share the profits after the game was released. The senior executives of the Scarlet Institute were very interested in this plan and expressed their opinions. Some of the suggestions made Feng Qi's eyes light up. For example, Director Lee of the Scarlet Institute's Biological Research Department said that the super virtual game could be expanded and developed. For example, the content of the domain dungeon. However, the workload of the dungeon development was too large, and they had to copy related technology from the future. In other words, they had to plant the seeds in advance and copy the finished product from the future. However, there were also flaws in this aspect. At this stage, the knowledge implantation technology had a capacity limit, and the future super virtual technology might be the product of N generations of updates, so there were incompatibilities. Relying only on copying the content of the future database to create a virtual dungeon was time-consuming and inefficient. In this direction, Vivian proposed a more effective method. That was to let players personally collect data and then create a domain dungeon. As long as it was certified by the Dungeon Review Department, it could be released in the game and then enjoy a share of the dungeon's profits. What they had to do was to provide the players with a dungeon world editor and let the players create it themselves. Perhaps there would be many excellent dungeons that could make the players feel fun and improve their strength. During the discussion, the 6 general directions of the super virtual game were decided. The first was the core, a multiplayer match. This was the core of the super virtual game and the original intention of the super virtual game's development. Everything was to serve the cultivators to improve their resistance, awareness, and skills. The second direction was the creation of domain dungeons. In addition to the domain dungeons that Feng-Chi conceived to simulate reality, they could also add virtual domain dungeons created by players using the game's built-in editor. It was similar to the setting of the Warcraft map editor before the Cataclysm. In this detail, they also added many restrictions to the players' self-created dungeons during the discussion. For example, dungeons that could pass the review must not be purely for entertainment. For example, dungeons that engaged in sex, dungeons that were purely for leisure farming, and so on. The existence of these dungeons went against the original intention of the super virtual game's development. It would also consume the cultivators' energy and time. Not only would it not promote the development of the overall strength of mankind, but it would also drag them down. This was not the era of entertainment to death. It could be entertainment, but it had to be combined with practical content. While creating an environment for the cultivators to improve, it had to bring them joy. Therefore, all purely entertainment content had to be eliminated. The detailed planning in this regard would be handed over to the Dungeon Review team formed by the Scarlet Research Institute. The third direction was the Virtual Research and Development Experimental Direction. For example, many virtual experimental projects only needed to simulate the corresponding scenes and materials in the virtual game and then conduct experiments in the virtual environment. The experimental results might not be completely similar to reality, but they had great reference value. It could effectively improve the use of resources and reduce unnecessary waste. Feng-Chi and the Scarlet Research Institute's upper echelons decided not to open the content of virtual research and development to the public for the time being. It would only be carried out within the Scarlet Research Institute. After all, there are no completely reliable research institutes to cooperate with at this stage. Everything still needed to be investigated. In the future, when an absolutely reliable research institute appeared, they would share the virtual experimental scenes that were only for internal use. The fourth direction was the revenue planning of the virtual game. Maintaining the operation of the super virtual game was an extremely expensive matter. After all, this game required a server with super many people online. Other than that, there were also the team expenses for the daily maintenance of the game. The Scarlet Research Institute's funds also needed to be invested in other research. It was impossible to spend all of it on the super virtual game. Feng-Chi's original intention of creating a virtual game was to promote the progress of human civilization and earn money from it to make up for the expenses in the future. During the discussion, he and the Scarlet Research Institute's upper echelons decided that this super virtual game would adopt a free plus charging model. The specific direction was that players would download the game and experience the game content for free. There would be charges on additional items. However, these charging items had to ensure that they did not destroy the fairness of the game content and did not affect the core content of the game. The tentative charging items were as follows. 1. The ornamental appearance in the game, that is, clothes and accessories, would need to be purchased with money. 2. The entertainment dungeon created by players in the game would need to be downloaded for a fee after review. In addition, 1 to 20% of the profits would be distributed to the creator of the dungeon, the specific distribution ratio would depend on the quality of the dungeon created by the player. 3. Specific avatar icons in the game would need to be purchased. 4. Player spontaneous trading behavior, such as trading accessories and clothes, will be charged a transaction fee of 5%. 5. Souvenirs derived from the game would be charged. The fifth direction was the distribution of virtual gaming pods. The creation of the super virtual game was more or less solved. The virtual engine was also created, but it still needed to be improved and perfected. In this regard, the Scarlet Research Institute would assist Feng Zhio in the follow-up development. This would also include the recruitment and training of our designers. However, there was still a crucial issue that had not been solved. The super virtual game required a gaming pod to be distributed. Without a gaming pod, no matter how good the game was, it would be useless. After all, the connection of the brain nerves was another core aspect of the virtual game. In this aspect, there was a ready-made partner. The Scarlet Research Institute's president immediately said that he would contact Li Xingchen in the near future and cooperate on the distribution of virtual gaming pods. He would also increase the progress of the creation of virtual gaming pods. The sixth direction was the promotion of the game. In terms of promotion, the Scarlet Research Institute had its own channels, but it was not necessarily suitable for the distribution of the game. After all, the Scarlet Research Institute's position was a bit special. It was an independent organization. Apart from self-digesting, it generally served the domain battle groups, but did not serve the major universities. Therefore, the Scarlet Research Institute would need to contact the higher-ups of the major universities and promote the super virtual game. The cost of promotion in this aspect was negligible. Although the Scarlet Research Institute was an independent organization, it had the right to connect scientific research projects that were beneficial to the development of mankind to the major universities. For example, it would require the major universities to purchase and install a number of gaming pods, and then promote the super virtual game to the players. Therefore, the most expensive promotion for other games was the easiest problem for the Scarlet Research Institute to solve. As for the promotion of non-cultivators, it would not be considered for the time being. However, there were exceptions. For example, high school students who had yet to learn about cultivation, but were preparing to learn about it. After all, the main target of the game was cultivators. As for the future, they might even join the scientific research team. The rest of the normal players, who were not cultivators or researchers, were completely dispensable targets, even if they could earn a lot of money from them. However, making money would never be the core of the game. In addition to these 6 directions, there are many other things to add. For example, in the initial testing phase of the super virtual game, which target groups should be targeted, how many beta codes should be given out, and so on. Time quickly passed by during the discussion. When it was time for dinner, Feng Qi and the senior executives of the Scarlet Research Institute came to the dining hall. After a sumptuous dinner, they returned to the highest conference room and started an all-night discussion. It was obvious that the senior executives of the Scarlet Research Institute were very interested in the creation of the super virtual game. They were also willing to invest a lot of energy to make the game better. It wasn't because they wanted to make money, but because they, like Feng Qi, believed that the emergence of the super virtual game could greatly promote the development of human civilization. Moreover, the super virtual game they were planning was an improved version of the future version. The previous super virtual game in the future was purely based on players fighting against each other. The main purpose was to improve the players' combat awareness and skills, as well as their proficiency in casting spells. It could also be called a duel simulator. However, in the vision of the senior executives of the Scarlet Research Institute, on top of the original foundation of the super virtual game, they also developed a second world with a lot of content, such as scientific knowledge of the domain, simulated exploration of the domain, experimental research simulation, biological simulation of the domain, and a lot of other content. If this super virtual game could be created, the potential of human development in all aspects would be greatly improved. In the eyes of the senior executives of the Scarlet Research Institute, the value of this game was comparable to that of a god-level cultivation technique that only existed in the imagination. Therefore, Feng Qi could completely understand why they were so interested in the creation of the super virtual game. It was late at night, but the lights in the highest conference room were still on. Feng Qi and his colleagues worked through the night to draw a blueprint for the future of human development. When they talked about the bright future, they couldn't help but feel excited. Chapter 194. For the next 3 days, Feng Qi stayed at the Scarlet Institute. During this time, other than discussing the future development of the virtual reality game with the Scarlet Institute's executives, he also handed over the game's detailed code to the Scarlet Institute. The game's development would be completed by Feng Zhiyou and the Scarlet Institute. He was full of anticipation for this epic-making virtual reality game. Now that the game's early structure was complete, as long as the Scarlet Institute and Li Xingqian completed the connection, the game could be released at any time. As for the lack of game content, it could be improved bit by bit. Once the game was released, the creative players would also contribute to the expansion of the game's content. Now that he had dug out a timeline that could allow him to contact the future, the only thing missing was the overall strength of humanity. Every time he came into contact with the future, he had to experience the tragic moment of civilization's destruction. To solve this problem, he had to increase the overall strength of humanity. Therefore, the launch of the virtual reality game was significant. Once it was officially released, it might increase the population of the Star City Sanctuary by dozens of times, or even more. The overall strength of the future would also be affected by the butterfly effect. Anything was possible. What he desperately wanted to know was what the black shadow meant by the arrival of the general trend. But to know the answer to this question, the premise was that the future had to have enough strength to support the arrival of the general trend. After discussing the relevant content with the Scarlet Institute's executives and leaving the technology behind, Feng Qi returned to Star City University. He went to the principal's office to greet Bai Fuxing before going to Feng Zhiyou's office. When he walked in, he saw Feng Zhiyou, who was wearing glasses, staring intently at the screen as if he was researching something. The other recruits in the office were also like Feng Zhiyou. They were all very focused. When Feng Zhiyou heard the door open, he turned around and looked at him with a smile on his face. "Brother Qi, you're here." Feng Qi nodded and sat down next to Feng Zhiyou. "Have you gotten used to living here?" "I'm used to it. I'm very used to it. Now, my parents are fully supporting me in developing the virtual engine, and this is my hobby. I've never felt so free before. Also, the virtual engine has basically been completed, but there are still many areas that need improvement. I'm already working on these issues." Looking at the excited Feng Zhiyou, a smile appeared on Feng Qi's face. Next, he explained the Scarlet Institute situation to Feng Zhiyou in detail. When Feng Zhiyou heard that the Scarlet Institute would support him, he was pleasantly surprised. He had always been worried about creating a virtual reality game. Because of this, he knew exactly how difficult it was to create a virtual reality game. Even with his virtual engine, it was only the beginning. He still needed to collect a lot of data about spell trajectories and other aspects. Even if Feng Qi had the ability to solve these problems, it would take an unknown amount of time. But the starting point was at least 20 years. When he heard that he could obtain the support of an authoritative scientific research institution, he suddenly felt that this time might be shortened by at least 10 years. From Feng Zhiyou's perspective, this was undoubtedly good news. Next, Feng Qi gave Feng Zhiyou the contact information of Director Long of the Scarlet Institute's newly established virtual game department. He asked him to work with Director Long on perfecting the virtual reality game. After explaining the situation in detail, he said goodbye to Feng Zhiyou and returned to his dorm. He entered the room, sat down at his desk, and opened his notebook. Now that the sequela of the overlapping memories had not completely disappeared, he planned to enter the future dream in a few days. But before that, he decided to plan the direction of the next future timeline in advance. There was a lot of information at the moment, so there were many routes to choose from. After thinking for a moment, he began to write. Future Timeline 1. Dark Timeline. Join the Domain Organization. Contact the Domain Assassin and try to join the Domain Organization Alliance. Learn about the Domain Organization from the inside. Note: if you choose to join the Domain Organization Alliance, you need to go to the Scarlet Institute to modify your runes to ensure that you look like a domain creature. Note 2. If you join the domain organization, you might be able to learn the secrets of why the domain organization lurks in human society. Note 3. If you join the future timeline of a domain creature, as long as you have enough lifespan, you might be able to witness the arrival of the general trend that the Black Shadow spoke of. Difficulty is high. You need to live for more than 1,000 years. Risk. In the eyes of the assassin, I come from another domain organization and have a powerful domain clan behind me. It won't be easy to join the alliance of the weak clans. If I suddenly choose to confess that I'm also a domain individual without a powerful domain clan behind me, it will undoubtedly arouse suspicion. I might be targeted before I even join the alliance. Future Timeline 2, Li Ming Timeline, Mu Yao Timeline. Hide to the early stages and wait for the right time to join the Lumin Can. Try to get in touch with Murakami and learn the truth and secrets of the world from Murakami. Note, this future timeline is very risky. It's very likely that you'll die young, but it's worth a try. Future Timeline 3. Fight against the Tiger Soul Institute. Tentative, conflicts with the plan, unite the known organizations in the same field to fight against the Tiger Soul Institute. Then check the future changes. Note, this future timeline conflicts with Lin Rant's anti-parasitism of the Lord of the Fog. If the Tiger Soul Institute's future plans fail, Lin Ran won't have the chance to obtain the Lord of the Fog. Future Timeline 4. Peer Intelligence Timeline. Try to get in touch with the Prajna Domain Battle Group and the Victory Domain Battle Group and learn more about the domain organizations from them. Note, at this stage, the Prajna Domain Battle Group and the Victory Domain Battle Group are in the same field. Getting in touch with them might lead to unexpected gains. Future Timeline 5. Humanity's timeline. At this stage, the various domain organizations mistakenly believe that I'm a domain creature. Therefore, I can use the name of a domain organization as a cover to form a domain alliance with other organizations in the same field. When I have enough strength, we can announce to the world the truth about the domain organizations hiding in human civilization. Then, we can fight against the domain organizations together with all of humanity. Note, this is a very radical future timeline. It can expose many domain organizations hiding in human society at once. However, this future timeline has a greater risk. It is very likely that human civilization will be destroyed prematurely. In the future dream, there might not even be a Star City sanctuary. Future Timeline 6. Science and Technology Research Timeline. Xiaohe Timeline. Join the Science and Technology Research Timeline again. Use the known technology to advance to the second echelon of the core circle. Then, find a way to advance to the first echelon of the Science and Technology Research Timeline and try to get in touch with the most mysterious ink. Note, only by getting in touch with ink will you be able to know the core secrets of the Science and Technology Research Timeline and Xiaohe secrets. Note 2. There is a small chance that this future timeline will lead you to the method to control Xiaohe. After writing down the 6 future timelines, Feng Qi put down his pen. With the information he had collected, he could actually come up with more options for the future. However, he still chose the 6 future timelines in his notebook as his reference. After thinking for a moment, he crossed out the future timeline of fighting against the Tiger Soul Institute and getting into a conflict with Lin Rant's anti-parasitism of the Lord of the Fog. Now, there were 4 future timelines in front of him. How should he choose? Feng Qi fell into deep thought. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to take a risk and choose to join the Lumin Can's future timeline. He had been hesitating about this future timeline for a long time. The risk was high, but the benefits were also great. As long as he could get in touch with Murakami, he would be able to obtain a lot of information from her. In the future, Murakami would also become his companion and provide him with help like Vivian. However, the risk of dying young was always there. He was also prepared for this future timeline to be fruitless. After making his choice, he bought a batch of ingredients for making Sake Online. After completing the payment, he only had a little over 1 million left. It was not enough to pay for the next purchase of ingredients for Sake's sake. However, The lack of money was no longer a big problem. He had already laid his cards on the table with the Scarlet Institute. He could get financial support from the Scarlet Institute. The only problem was the aftereffects of memory overlap. If it was a message, he would not have to worry about this problem. However, the current situation was obviously different from before. If it was just a message, he felt that it was not suitable for the current situation. Previously, it was a shallow exploration of unknown information. Now, it was an in-depth investigation. It was very likely that the enemy would leave behind misleading information, which would lead to a series of errors in judgment and cause a chain reaction. Although the narrator said that it was better not to read his future memories unless it was necessary, the best way to read his future memories was to obtain the best information. However, reading memories was obviously the best way to ensure the validity of the information. It would also allow him to understand all the details of the future timeline. Thinking of this, he immediately asked, "Narrator, is there a way to solve the problem of memory overlap?" "Yes, I can provide you with 2 methods." "Tell me in detail." "The first method is to rest for a few days every time you return from the future dream to digest the effects of memory overlap. However, the hidden danger is that the accumulation of negative emotions will greatly affect you and cause you to have mental problems. The second method is to obtain unlimited memory ability. Any memory information can be digested in an instant without any after effects. Unlimited memory ability. Feng Qi had been longing for it for a long time. However, he did not have any clues as to how to obtain this ability. He automatically ignored the narrator's second method. The first method was feasible. However, the hidden danger could not be ignored. If he continued to accumulate negative emotions, he might really go crazy. With this thought in mind, he immediately asked, "Is there a way to solve the accumulation of negative emotions caused by memory overlap?" "It can be solved, but you have to obtain a talent ability that can purify the mind. With this ability, you can eliminate the effects of the accumulation of negative emotions every time you read a memory." Realizing that the problem of negative emotions could be solved, he continued to ask, "Are purification type innate abilities as difficult to obtain as infinite memory?" "It is extremely difficult to obtain, but now there is a ready-made target." "What target?" "Do you remember Sambai? At that time, you tried to control it with psychokinesis, but it instantly purified and countered it. This ability obviously has the effect of purifying the mind." After listening to these words, the appearance of Sambai suddenly appeared in his mind. The encounter with Sambai was purely an accident. When he entered the future dream, he found out, after checking the database information in the Star City Sanctuary, that the future timeline mysteriously died in the dormitory a few hours after he left. This information made him realize that he would face a life-and-death crisis after returning to reality this time. In order to become stronger, he did not collect information on that future timeline. Instead, he chose to hunt domain creatures everywhere in the future dream to increase his strength. He wanted to have the strength to fight against the domain assassins after returning. As a result, he encountered Sambai during the hunt. At that time, the narrator suggested that this creature was relatively weak and could be slaughtered. In the end, he met it. Sambai's combat power was indeed not strong, but its movements were extremely agile. Even if he activated his blood source ability, he could not keep up with Sambai's speed. It was fine if he could not catch up, but the problem was that Sambai was extremely vengeful. As a result, he was mentally tortured for an entire future dream timeline. During this period, Sambai followed him wherever he went. He still clearly remembered the devilish dance of raising its head and swinging its tail. What was even more excessive was the wave of ridicule before its death. It was painful torture. At this time, he realized that killing Sambai might be able to solve the problem of his negative emotions. The idea of killing Sambai suddenly surged in his mind. However, the problem was that Sambai was extremely agile and it was difficult for him to catch it with his current strength. Before he could harvest Sambai's talent ability, he had to go through a wave of strength enhancement. Time passed while he was thinking. As for his future plans, he had another plan to strengthen his strength and kill Sambai. For the next few days, Feng Qi chose to give himself a holiday. However, it was not purely a holiday. It was mainly to digest the effects of the overlapping memories. During this period, he did not miss out on the research and thinking classes for the students in the school. During this period, his influence in Star City University increased day by day. He already had a large group of little fans. Every class he gave was even more packed. In addition to the students in his class, students from other classes would also come to sit in on the class. The content he taught in class would also become one of the hot topics on Star City University's forum that day. At noon, Feng Qi received a call from Bai Fuxing. He brought him good news. The Ministry of Education had approved his teacher certification. At this stage, he was the only teacher in the school who had obtained a teacher certification before graduating. When he heard the news, he immediately expressed his gratitude to Bai Fuxing over the phone. The reason he was able to pass the Ministry of Education's approval was not only because he received the silver medal for outstanding contribution to humanity and the second honorary certification for Tiger Fist, but also because of Bai Fuxing's hard work. With his performance and Bai Fuxing's recommendation, the Ministry of Education no longer had any objections to his teaching ability. After a round of internal voting within the Ministry of Education, he was specially granted the Star City Academy's teaching certificate in the form of a unanimous vote. In the future, he would no longer be a substitute teacher. He would completely get rid of his identity as a student and obtain an official teacher certification. While enjoying all kinds of benefits, he would also receive a salary of 150,000 yuan every month. Feng Qi was very happy about this. That night, he gathered Lin Ran, Mu Qing, and the other students at the north corner of Xuefa restaurant for a meal. When he announced that he had obtained an official teacher certification, he also treated them to a big meal. Of course, he did not spend any money on this meal. After all the food in Xuefa restaurant was free.